Before the video begins, I just want to thank everyone for all the amazing support thus far. The channel has grown tremendously, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. This video is a compilation of the first 10 volumes of the True Scary Horror Stories or True Terrifying Tales series that either you as subscribers have submitted or have been narrated from the awesome authors over at Reddit Let's Not Meet. Now, it would be a dream to continue making narrations and videos here on Let's Read full time, and every day that goes by, it is seeming more and more like a possibility. If you'd wish to assist me in achieving that reality, I've recently started my own Patreon and PayPal accounts, linked in the description below. But I ask that you only donate should your heart feel inclined to be so generous. All proceeds will go to continuing to generate better and more frequent content here for this awesome community to enjoy. So, without further ado, let's begin. I am 22, and this incident happened a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment and was in the process of moving in. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed. So, I was going to the entrance of my apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail while using the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. And he didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just going to take a shower and call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, jumped out my window — my apartment is on the first floor — and called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone comes out the door of the apartment complex. This was during summer, and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window in the entry door. I called my boyfriend, and he came to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house — I was a mess, shivering and crying — told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. Jane. When I was about 11, I had a steady babysitter named Jane. My brother and sister were 17 and 18, so they were either too cool to babysit me or busy with school around this time. Jane was their age, but I don't think her family had a lot of money, so she would babysit me almost every weekend instead of doing normal teenager stuff. My family lived in a pretty well-to-do cul-de-sac in the back of a large neighborhood. It was one of those neighborhoods where the houses got nicer the further you went back. The houses at the front, by the main road, were not as nice, but still not terrible or anything, and this is where Jane lived. Since I was 11 and prepubescent, I was a huge pain in the ass. But not to Jane. I looked at her as a best friend. We did so many fun things together, and I could truly tell that Jane loved me. One Saturday night, my mom was making plans for the next week. But for the first time, Jane couldn't babysit. She had her first prom. She was very excited because the boy had had a crush on her for years and asked her. I knew, because she had been telling me about him since she started high school. My mother and I were both very excited for her, and I saw my mom hand her way more money than usual. Jane's eyes teared up, and she gave us both a hug and left. Since this was the mid-90s, everyone got babysitters from word of mouth. My mom heard from another mother that a girl that used to babysit for her kids had just moved back to her parents' house after grad school. She lived down the street from Jane. Her name was Becky, and my mom called her up to see if she could babysit me that Saturday. Becky excitedly said yes and proceeded to ask my mom somewhat strange but not entirely alarming questions like how tall I was, what I looked like, etc. There might have been other questions, but I was just hearing my mom's side of the conversation. When she hung up the phone, my mom said to my dad, "Wow, she sure is thorough." I was a little nervous, as Jane had been the only one to babysit me for years. In the rare instances she couldn't do it, my parents usually just canceled their plans. But this was a work party, and my dad was being honored, so that wasn't an option. A couple of days before Becky was to come, I begged my mom to call Jane. I wanted to see if I could come over the night of prom and see her in her dress. My mom kept telling me she wouldn't want me there, and that I could see pictures, but I insisted. So my mom called Jane and handed the phone to me. "Hey there, May. How are you?" "I'm good. I wanted to see if I could come over on Saturday and see you in your prom dress." "Of course. I'm getting my hair done, but you can come after that, maybe around 5:30. Tell your mom to call first and make sure that I'm home." "It won't be my mom. It'll be Becky." Dead silence. "Wait, what?" "Since you couldn't watch me, my mom found a girl named Becky to do it." Long pause. "Okay, sweetie. That's fine." She hurriedly got me off the phone. I went to school the next day and came home to my mom hanging up the phone, shaking her head. Poor Jane. Her date doesn't want to take her anymore. I guess they had a fight. She wanted to know if she could still watch you this Saturday. I feel bad canceling on Becky, but it's completely up to you. Of course, I chose Jane, and as usual, we had tons of fun. I didn't bring up the prom because I didn't want to make her sad. But then she asked me if I wanted to play dress up. We did each other's hair and put on my mom's dresses and took pictures with my mother's Polaroid. It was the best night of an 11-year-old's life. Jane went to community college, and by the time she went to a 4-year school, I no longer needed a babysitter. We kept in touch a little after that, but before long, we both got busy and we lost touch. This is where the story ended, until this past weekend. I ran into Jane at a bar. She was not sober. In fact, she was very drunk. She didn't seem to be doing well. She was very thin, and it looked like she had track marks on her arms. This made me extremely sad because she was one of those people I loved most in the world, at least at one time. I sat next to her at the bar and asked how she was doing. Her face lit up and she gave me a big hug. I always knew you would do well for yourself. Look at you. You're all grown up and beautiful. You look great too, Jane. No, I don't. But it's okay. We started talking and she was drinking even more. I got the feeling that she was in blackout territory. She was with a group of people that seemed to be her friends, so I wasn't entirely worried for her. But I still didn't want to leave her for some reason. She seemed really happy to see me. We started reminiscing, and once it was my turn to bring up a story again, I said, "Remember that dirtbag that stood you up from prom?" So we staged our own prom with pictures and everything. Oh, that was great. He didn't stand me up. The replacement babysitter was a sick fuck. When I was little, she beat me, sexually abused me, threatened me, and locked me in closets. Then she would invite her boyfriend over and do the same things to me. She told me if I ever told anyone, she would kill my family and I would have to live in an orphanage. She took pictures of me too. I had repressed it until you said her name that day. Now it's all back. All of it. I should have told someone, but it's too late now. I just didn't want people to know what had happened to me. I thought they would look at me differently. I regret so much. Who knows what else she did? She set down her drink and gave me a hug, and a good to see you, like she hadn't just dropped a major bomb on me. She stumbled out with her boyfriend. Everything came flooding back to me. The phone conversation with Becky with all the details. Jane's silence when I said Becky's name. How Jane stayed with me every single weekend until I was old enough to not need a babysitter. Some people might say Jane should have told someone, but she was just a kid. But she was an extraordinary kid. She gave up her prom to save me. She gave up every single weekend after that so nothing would ever happen to me. She was my guardian angel. Unfortunately, Jane didn't have her own Jane, and it makes me feel horrible. So Becky, let's not meet. If we do, I might just rip your throat out for changing the life of the most extraordinary person I had ever known. No good deed goes unpunished. This happened in the fall of 1993, when I was 20 years old. In the interest of context, this was before I started college, and I was working in the material prep department of a plastics factory on the night shift. I was the only woman in the department. My male coworkers were initially skeptical that I could handle the job, but I proved myself and earned their respect. It was hard work, but on the plus side, it also put me in the best shape of my life. It was also about this time that I'm dumped by my abusive boyfriend. He was verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, as well as an alcoholic. This fact, more than anything, is probably why I got myself into this situation in the first place. I'd just gotten off of work, and it was about 1:30 a.m. My car was running on fumes, so I stopped at a local gas station to fill up. While I was pumping gas, a woman about my age approached me looking nervous and scared. She said that she had been at her boyfriend's house and they had had a fight. She'd walked to the gas station to use the payphone and call a friend to pick her up. On her way up to the station, a car pulled up as she was walking, and the guys inside started catcalling and harassing her. With a slight movement of her head, she indicated a car that was parked off to the side by the gas station dumpsters. I saw a large light green car, like a Caddy or a Lincoln, with at least 2 or 3 shadowy figures inside. She said they threatened her, and she was too scared to call her friend and wait. The woman was neat, well-dressed, and didn't seem high or drunk or anything like that. She just seemed really nervous and freaked out, so I didn't even hesitate. I finished pumping my gas and told her to hop in the car, that I'd take her home. At that time on a weeknight, there was little traffic, so I booked it right out of the gas station and asked her where she had lived. She kept twisting around in the seat to see if the car was behind us, and when I asked her to put her seatbelt on, she ignored me and kept looking for the car. I assumed she was just scared. A few blocks down the road, however, I noticed she was looking around the car, and she started asking me about money. "Where's your purse? Where's your bag? I need money. You need to give me some money." My stomach sank. I have this woman in my car, and now she's gonna rob me. Fuck. But when I thought about it, robbery just didn't make much sense. I was driving a 1985 Chevette, affectionately named Shitbox, and was wearing my work clothes, a ratty t-shirt and jeans with combat boots. I did not look like a person with a lot of cash, primarily because I wasn't a person with a lot of cash. She twisted around in the seat again and started yelling, "There they are! There they are!" She didn't sound scared anymore. I checked the rear view, and sure enough, the light green car is right behind me. She started cackling and bouncing up and down in the seat. "My boys are gonna fuck you up, bitch. They're gonna fuck you up." She's laughing like crazy, opening the glove box, looking in the back for a bag or a purse, telling me all the messed up shit these guys are planning to do to me. Now, if I had been smart, I would have just driven to the police station. Actually, if I had been very smart, I would have called the cops from the gas station and waited with her until they had arrived. That would have been the intelligent thing to do. Unfortunately, none of this crossed my mind until later. In the moment, I just got really, really fucking angry. I realized 3 key things all at once. There was an intersection up ahead, with cars on either side waiting to cross, and the light had just turned yellow. I had a spare box cutter that I had kept for work in the driver's side door compartment. The crazy bitch still hadn't put on her seatbelt. I didn't think. I floored it and passed under the yellow light just as it turned red. I glanced back to see if the green car was still behind me, but the cross traffic at the intersection had started to move, and they hadn't caught up. The bitch started yelling, and I slammed on the brakes, and she hit the dash and windsailed with a solid and viciously satisfying crack. When she rebounded to the passenger seat, I had the box cutter in her face and was screaming some serious batshit crazy. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was along the lines of, "Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out of my car before I cut your face and make you eat it, bitch." The crazy screaming and box cutter combo worked. She grabbed blindly at the handle and popped the door open, and I started shoving and punching her until the bitch tumbled out the door to the curb. I stomped on the gas, got to the next turn, and squealed around it with the passenger door still open. I made a few more turns because I was afraid that the green car might catch up to me. After a little while, I stopped to close the passenger door, and then I cut across town and got onto the highway to go home. I was on the highway for about 5 minutes before the shake started. I pulled off to the shoulder to calm down and get my shit together, and then I drove home. I told my older sister. I was living with her temporarily after the breakup with my ex, everything that had happened. She wrapped me in a tight bear hug while simultaneously yelling about how stupid I was for not going to the police. I had never been so glad to be yelled at in my life. I thought this was only an urban legend. I was driving home from work at 2 a.m. I'm a nurse, and I live in a small city. The roads were totally deserted, and it was a freezing night. I don't live far from work, maybe a couple of miles. I'm driving down a residential street around the corner from my house, and I see a man laying face down in the street. Now remember, I'm a nurse. My first thought was, great, gotta help this guy up. I was coming off a long shift and falls happen all the time. As I slowed down the car, I suddenly realized what an idiot move that was. I'm a 100-pound woman, and I don't carry any weapons. I thought I should do something to help the guy, so I called 911 as I drove past him and slowed to a stop at the end of the block. While I was stopped at the light, I explained to the dispatcher that there was a man in the road who might need some assistance. All of a sudden, I hear a loud bang, bang from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window and jiggling the handle of my locked car. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that there was no man laying in the street. Still on the phone with 911, I screamed, "I'm so scared," to the dispatcher and floored it through the red light. I quickly told him what had happened, and even though I was right by my house, he told me to keep driving. After a few minutes, I had calmed down, and he told me to loop back around. I pulled over down the road from my house and stayed in the car. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got off the phone with the dispatcher, who told me he was sending a police car to cruise the area. As I gathered up my things, I do a final scan of the area, and I see the man. He is walking with 2 other men. I hunched way down in my car until they were far down the road, then bolted into my house. I don't know if he had ill intent, but freaks me the hell out that he wasn't alone. Always lock your doors and carry mace. The Weirdo at McDonald's, aka the day I lost some of my innocence. When I was growing up, my dad and I lived with my grandparents. My parents had me while they were teenagers, and my dad got full custody because he lived with grandparents, and my mom was just living with random friends, going from house to house every few weeks. I was the daughter my grandparents never had, and they doted on me. When I was 6, my grandpa passed away from cancer. This story takes place about 5 months after he passed away. This was, I believe, a Saturday, and my dad was at work. My gram decided to take me to McDonald's for lunch, and, like any 6-year-old, I was really excited. So we go to the McDonald's that was about 1.5 miles from our house, order our lunch, and sit down at the table to eat. At the time, we were the only ones eating inside. About 10 minutes after we sit down, a scraggly-looking man walks in, orders a meal, and sits down at the table diagonally in front of us to the left. The area we live in was middle and upper middle class, so this guy looked pretty out of place. Graham had her back to him, but I could see him perfectly. This man was at least in his mid-50s, with a really wiry, scraggly and dirty white hair and beard. He had on blue shirts and a white t-shirt, also kinda dirty, and sandals. It's amazing. This happened 21 years ago, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. So, I noticed that, under the table, the man had something dark, pink, and wrinkly in his lap, and he kept glancing at me and rubbing it every few seconds. In kindergarten, we learned about stranger danger and good touch, bad touch, and learned which parts of the body weren't supposed to be touched. It clicked in my 6-year-old head that this man was not supposed to have that out like that, nor doing what he was doing. I got really queasy and nervous. I didn't want to tell my gram right then and there, because I thought the man would hurt us. If my dad had been there, I would have said something because my dad was my hero and could take on anybody. Instead, I put my Happy Meal box in front of my face so my view of this guy would be blocked. I had about half my food left, but had lost my appetite. Graham asked me if I was full, and I just nodded yes. I was, and still am, very petite, so not finishing a full meal was nothing new for me. She asked me if I wanted to go play in the play area before we left, but I just shook my head and quietly said, "I want to go home." Graham cleared our table and we left. When we got home, I was still really nervous and felt like I was going to throw up. Graham asked me, "What's the matter, Munchkin?" And I started crying and told her about the man at the McDonald's and what I saw. My Graham didn't panic or freak or get hysterical. She just hugged me and said, "It's all right. Go on to your room and play, and I'll take care of it." She wiped away my tears, gave me a blueberry Kool-Aid burst, and told our dog Patches to go to my room with me, which she did. After I was out of earshot, Graham called the McDonald's and told them about the guy. He was still there. The manager told Graham he'd take care of it and call her back. An hour later, the manager calls back and tells Graham they called the police, who showed up in record time and arrested the guy. When the police told the man to stand up, his Franken beans were still hanging out of his shorts. The manager also told Graham that she could bring me back for a month's worth of coupons for free Happy Meals. Just to give you some background information, I'm a 29-year-old female, and this happened to me 4 years ago. My family lived on a farm in rural outback Western Australia, just north of Geraldton, in a modest-looking wooden farmhouse. My son and I lived here alone most of the time, while my husband worked on rotation up north on the mines. We had no neighbors, no mobile phone reception, and very little connection with the outside world, with the exception of the television. There was only one window in the house, situated above my bed in the bedroom. It was a small old wooden-framed window with no curtains. However, the window was completely jammed, and as much as I had tried to close it, there was about 2 inches of opening near the bottom of the window frame. My husband and I spent a while trying to oil the hinges and loosen it up the day before he left to go to work again. But we gave up, as it wasn't a huge issue at the time. Fast forward to a couple of nights later, I'm standing in front of the television, doing the ironing and watching Sex and the City reruns while my son is asleep in my bed. As I walk up the hallway to enter the laundry to grab another load of washing, I pass my bedroom and pop my head in to check on my son. My heart stops. The window frame above my bed is shuffling from side to side. My eyes scan down, and what I see next will never leave my mind again. There were two hands squeezing through the gap of my window, trying to lift up the jammed frame. I screamed the house down, grabbed my son, the phone, and locked myself in the bathroom and called the police. I'd hate to think what would happen if I hadn't been walking past the bedroom at that exact moment. This happened when I was 13 years old. I'm a female, and much older now. I lived in a quiet, safe neighborhood with one sketchy block before mine. It was a corner that had 4 bars, one on each corner. My parents were strict. They were the kind that had to not only meet my friends, but their parents as well. The year I turned 13, I was old enough to go to our community teen hangout. I don't want to give the name, as it may give away my location. You paid $3 to get in. It was open only on Friday nights, and the hours were from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. I lived about a quarter mile from the center, and it was located in town. My path was well lit until I got the last 4 blocks that included the bars. I was allowed to walk and meet my best friend halfway. She lived closer than I did to the center because of the area. One night, after the center closed, I was walking my usual route when I noticed a guy pacing me on the other side of the street. I had already left my friend, and I had 6 more blocks to go. I wasn't sure he was following me, so I decided to try and play a game. I would randomly stop and look at something in a store window using the glass to see if he stopped too. And he did. I tried this a few more times, and every time he stopped with me. I was approaching the 4 bars, and there were a lot of motorcycles and people out next to their bikes drinking and being loud. I wasn't apprehensive because these guys never bothered me, and I had been walking this way for 3 weeks without any problem from them. The guy kept up with me until we reached the bars. Then I noticed him turn around. I relaxed and hightailed it home, thinking I was going to be in trouble for being later than normal. I didn't tell my mom and dad what happened because I reasoned nothing had happened, and it was just my overactive imagination. Cue the next Friday with a repeat of the previous Friday. I did tell my friend, who said she could get her mom to drive me home, and I told her no because I didn't want to lose privileges, and he didn't really do anything yet. I should also mention that around this time, I was stopped one evening by the bikers at the bar. A woman asked me why I was always coming home so late by myself. She was nice, and I explained what I was doing. After that, they would always wave but never stop me. The next Friday, the guy crossed the street. I froze for the first time. I could see him. He didn't seem too scary. He was an older man, and he was about 6 feet tall, not really heavy, and had dark hair and blue eyes. I started to back away because it felt weird that he had crossed the street. I was just about to the bar where the bikers were. I started to run, and he chased after me, saying, "I just want you to be my daughter." I was starting to cry. I was so scared, and he was gaining on me fast. What happened next is kind of a blur. I remember yelling, "Stay away from me," at this point, and I was right next to the bar. I was just screaming. I felt someone grab me and heard men yelling. I was trying to get up out of the grasp of whoever had me when I heard a familiar voice say, "Stop! I have you." I froze, looked up, and collapsed into a ball of tears. The other bikers had the guy, and someone called the police. My parents picked me up, and I thought I was in so much trouble with them, but they had just hugged me and said it would be okay. I don't know what happened to the guy, and my parents stopped me from going to the center for a while. I did get a chance to thank the people that helped me, and I hope that guy gets help, so we won't try to kidnap someone else for a daughter. I work inside of a pizzeria in a 24-hour gas station. It's actually very small, so we share a freezer, refrigerator, and back room with the gas station cashiers. The pizza place is a new addition, approximately 3 months, to the gas station. And so far my boss has only hired 3 college-age girls, including myself, to work here. So, I will begin this story from the time I was hired and work my way up to the present day. The first few days of my employment at the gas station, it was very nice. The gas station cashier who I usually worked with would frequently offer me free food and drinks from the soda fountain, which I often took home. He was an older guy, probably in his early to mid-40s, with a very thick accent and a loose grasp on English. He was also very tall compared to us girls, probably 1.5 foot difference, 6'5". Another cashier told me that he was Persian. That was pretty neat, I thought, until things started getting weird. One Saturday night, while him and I were alone there, common occurrence due to the small size of the station, he asked me to come to his house party. I politely declined. He was clearly upset, but didn't say much else until the next day. "I want to get to know you," he would say throughout the day. He wrote down his phone number and awkwardly stuffed it into my backpack as I was leaving that night. I smiled politely and told him sorry. I'm very busy. I didn't stick around to talk. Things escalated from there. Every few days, he would ask me to go out for coffee, or that he would buy me dinner. And every time I would decline, saying I was busy. He was getting more and more frustrated every time I would say no. But honestly, he scared me. I wasn't going to outright tell him that, no, I'm not interested and won't ever be, for some small fear in the back of my mind that he would hurt me. This went on for about a month, until the offers almost stopped completely. By this point, I was avoiding absolutely all contact with him, and I'm sure he picked up on it. When he and I were in the same room, I was completely tense and refused to say anything. I even started consistently locking the door to the pizzeria for fear that he would come in. He tried to wander in once or twice, but of course couldn't. That made him angry. I still wouldn't let him in and handed him whatever he needed over the counter. I drive a motorcycle, so there's no getting in and locking the doors when I leave at 12 a.m., and he knew that. One night, about 2 months in, I was leaving for the night. He had already left, but I was still tense. I felt a little crazy at first for doing this, but ever since I started reading Let's Not Meet about 2 years ago, I always carry a knife on me. No exceptions. So, that night, like most nights, I had my knife open in my pocket with my hand on it. I looked around the rather empty, cameraless parking lot and saw his car parked a few spaces away. I wasn't sure it was even his, so I wasn't worried and kind of laughed at myself for being so worked up. I started my bike to give it time to warm up. At that moment, the door to his car opens and I am 100% in fear mode. I frantically and awkwardly shove on my helmet. "Hey," he calls. "Hey." I don't answer. I just start rolling my motorcycle out of the parking space. He strolls out from the shadows and stands a foot or so in front of me. "Give me a kiss," he says in a really unsettling tone. He also puts his hand on my handlebar. Big no-no. And I reach for my pocket. He takes a slightly startled step back, probably thinking that I have pepper spray or something. In that second that he steps back, my fight or flight kicks in, and I tear out of that parking lot. "Where are you going?" he shouted, really angry. I didn't say anything. I rationalized that he didn't actually touch me, so who would care? My bosses were all foreign as well. Wouldn't they stick up for him? After that, he stopped talking to me completely. There were no more awkward advances, and I finally felt like I could relax. Until, of course, when my coworker was alone with him a few days ago. He had always called her the fat girl and the ugly one, but I didn't say anything about that either. When she went into the refrigerator to get some milk from the shelf, he was in there. While her back was turned, he grabbed her from behind, forcibly groped her and kissed her, and she was too scared to fight back. I don't know much else about the event. She doesn't want to talk about it either. But I know that if I had said something, that probably wouldn't have happened to her. He was immediately fired and is on his way back to Iran in the next week. I don't know what to do about it, or how to help her, but I'd like your advice. And if all you want to say is that I'm an idiot, well, I deserve it. Sorry for the long post. And, creepy gas station cashier, let's not meet. I am not afraid anymore. This happened to me when I was a young boy. I am now in my late 50s and haven't thought about being 10 years old in a long time. My youngest kid told me about this website a while back, so I thought you might all like to hear the story of someone I would never want to meet again. I remember it being around my 10th birthday when everything changed in my life for my family. I remember it being the best birthday yet because my mom had secretly saved up enough money to buy me my own bicycle, and I was more than thrilled. No more borrowing my older brother's when he let me, or standing on the back or sitting on the handlebars of a friend's bike. We were by no means well off when I was young. We didn't have much, so getting that bike had meant a lot to me. My father was a man who worked a lot and drank even more than he worked. I was pretty sure he was drunk more than he was ever sober, and because of that, he was hardly around. That was okay with me, my siblings, and my mother for the most part. Things were actually nice and peaceful when he was not home, and the nights he did actually come home, we knew right away to steer clear of him, be quiet, and leave him alone. We lived outside of a small town, down a long dirt road, with not very many neighbors nearby. The closest one was a good mile down from us, a really big farmhouse with a lot of fields around them. I remember being friends with their kids, as they were around the same age as us and we went to school together. Their mom was very sweet and always offered us something to eat or drink when we would stop down there. And their dad, well, he was the complete opposite of our father. I never seen him drink, or yell, or slap them or their mother around. We knew that not every family was like ours, and that some fathers out there actually seemed to care for them. Like I said, I remember it being around my 10th birthday because my mom had baked a big cake for myself, my brother, and my 2 younger sisters to share, and of course she had some too. Then she took me out back where she had hidden the bike from me in one of the sheds, and I remember screaming with excitement, hugging and kissing her, telling her I loved her and that she was the greatest mother ever. I hopped on it right away and took off up and down the road to test it out. It was a great feeling in that moment. When something so great happens, you kind of forget the regular hell life you seem to live every other day. It's hard to explain, I guess. I remember riding my bike down the dirt road on my way home from running into town to pick up something at the grocery store for my mom, when my dad's pickup truck passed me and kept heading on down toward home. It made me want to not even go back home, but really, what else could I do? The sun was just starting to go down, and normally, if he did come home, it was right after work or very late at night after he left who knows where. So it was kind of odd he was on his way home at this time of day. By the time I pulled up into the yard, I could already hear the yelling. I could hear my mom's voice trying to reason with him for something or other, and then I would hear my dad's voice just overpower hers. I heard something smash. I didn't want to go inside. I could hear my little sisters bawling, and then I heard my mom crying too. My older brother just happened to be down at the neighbor's place that had the farmhouse. I really didn't want to go inside at this point. I heard another smash. I decided to go in because I couldn't leave my mom and sisters in there alone with him. I peeked in the window of the door before I actually walked in and saw the house getting destroyed right in front of my family by my crazy, drunk father. I tried to open the door slightly and getting my sister's attention to come out, but my dad had seen and went from focusing on them to me. I blocked a lot of this out, but from what I can remember, he turned and went straight for me and picked me up by my shoulders and started screaming in my face. My mom was behind him, begging him to put me down, but he just turned around and gave her another slap in the face. Then she backed down. From what I could tell that was coming out of him, he was livid when he saw me riding down the road on a bike he knew wasn't my brother's. When he got home, he confronted my mom on where it came from and how I was on it. He got out of her that she had secretly been stashing away money to save up to get me the bike, and my dad lost it when she told him that. I'm sure he was probably on a 5 or 6 day heavy drinking binge at this point, because I remember the smell of his breath was like sour whiskey pouring into my nostrils as he screamed at me. He was sure that my brother was hiding other things from him, and he was going to find out what. That is why he started tearing up the house. In the 5 minutes it took from him passing me on the road until I got there, he had done quite a bit. All the furniture was thrown around, lamps and pictures had been smashed. He threw me against one of the walls, and as I looked up from the floor, he had stormed into the kitchen and smashed what was left of my birthday cake against the back door. Both my sisters were huddled in the corner, holding each other while my mom cried and had blood running down her face. That was it for me. This was the worst I had ever seen my father, and I was scared. I ran out of the house, hopped on my bike, and started heading towards the neighbors. We didn't have a telephone at the time, but I knew they did, and I was going to call the police in town and stop him. I hardly got out of the driveway when I heard the front door open and heard my father yelling to me to get my ass back there. I just kept on pedaling, thinking I needed to get to the neighbors and everything would be better. That's when I heard his truck start up, and I looked behind me as he was backing out of the driveway and started heading towards me. I could see the neighbor's house in the distance, and I just kept pedaling until I started to see the headlights getting closer and closer. I looked behind me, and he was so close that I knew he was going to hit me. I remember just jumping off the bike towards the side of the road and tumbling down into the side of the field. I shot up and just started running across the field towards the neighbors, hearing my dad yelling but not really caring. When I looked behind me, I seen that my father had already turned around and was heading back towards our house. I got to the neighbors a few minutes later and pounded on the door. Their mother opened the door and took a step back because at this point I was sobbing, shaking, and probably didn't look like my normal self. She took me inside and called to her husband to get in there. I was in the middle of telling them what happened when my brother and his friend walked in from playing out back, and in about 2 seconds, he was out the door heading towards home. The mother called the police in town, and they said they would send someone out right away. About 10 minutes had passed, and no police had shown up, so I begged the husband to please drive me down to my house. I didn't know what was happening, and I was scared. He agreed since he knew my little sister and my mom were there. About halfway down the road, we passed my bike. It was completely mangled up. My father had ran it over with his truck. I started crying again, partly because I loved that bike, and mostly because I could have still been on it when he did that. We get to the house, and my father's truck is gone. Apparently my brother ran all the way home, picked up a baseball bat that was on the side of the house, and with no hesitation, walked into the living room and smashed my dad's kneecap in. As he laid there screaming, my brother grabbed my sister and mother and ran into one of the bedrooms. He managed to crawl out to his truck and drive away, though. The cops showed up just a few minutes after the neighbor, and I arrived and took a look at everything that had happened. They found my father about an hour later, one town over, at the local tavern. Said it wasn't very hard to find someone since he was a well-known drunk in the area, and the bars were the first places they were going to look for him. They arrested him pretty much on the spot. That night, after the police found my father, the neighbors invited us to stay with them for however long we needed to. My mother was embarrassed, but so very thankful for their help. We only stayed a couple of days, enough time for my mom to make arrangements to leave that town and go live with my aunt, her sister, for a while and a couple 100 miles away from where we lived. I never did see my father again after that, and I have never really minded. I know he wasn't in jail for too long, because shortly after we got settled in at my aunt's was when we got the phone calls and letters. But my mom never caved and went back. Who would? After a year or so, he gave up and agreed to a divorce. I never really paid much attention to that, as I was still young and was living a different life than I had before. We stayed with my aunt for a couple of years until my mom saved up enough money after getting a job to get our own place. At that point, my brother was 16 or 17, so he also was helping bring in money from his job, as well as myself with a newspaper route. I even saved up enough money to get myself another bike. Life was better than it had ever been. Mad Jack, a sweet old man with a dark side. This happened when I was around 4 years old, so around 1992 or 93. I've been trying to dig up some information on when it happened, and possibly a newspaper article because it was actually a big deal in my town. I guess I'll start off by giving some background. My Nana was friends with an old man named Jack when I was a very little girl. Jack was always a super nice guy, but he also had a reputation for getting rowdy when he would drink. A pretty typical angry drunk from what I heard, although he was always kind and respectful to my family and I. Now, Jack had some kind of feud going on with a neighbor down the road for a bit. It was a common thing to see Jack at the bar or at a party drinking and talking about this neighbor who he hated so much. And he was always ranting about how one day he was just going to walk down there and blow this guy away with his shotgun. Of course, his friends always calmed him down, and this was a typical routine for years, so nobody thought he would actually do it. Everyone called him Mad Jack as a nickname because he could change his mood so fast when he was drinking and could be a little crazy. Of course, as a kid I didn't know any of this. I just knew him as a nice old man who gave my family my first dog. Fast forward to one morning when I was about 4, maybe 5, and I was up early, sitting with my Nana at the breakfast table. There was a knock at the door, which was pretty surprising as we didn't know a lot of early risers that wouldn't be off to work by that time. I sat at the kitchen table while my Nana answered the door, and I heard Jack's voice. I remember being curious because he sounded upset. Not just upset, he sounded scared. I remember thinking that something really scary must have happened to upset a big guy like Jack. My Nana sat Jack down in the living room on the couch and got him a fresh cup of coffee. I was still perched on the kitchen chair, listening to them talk, but pretending not to. My Nana just kept asking him what was wrong. "What's the matter, Jack? You seem really upset and you're scaring me. Just tell me what's wrong and we'll figure it out." I was across the living room and kitchen, but I still heard, with my sharp child ears, when Jack said, "I think I killed someone last night, Bet." My Nana was immediately in disbelief. She talked to him about details that he remembered. There weren't many because he was incredibly drunk at the time. He said that he couldn't remember a lot, but that he had gotten drunk and he remembered walking down the road to shoot the neighbor he was always talking about, and that he thought he may have done it. At this point, my Nana was very worried. Jack, scared, crying, sitting there, while me sitting there and listening to it all, hoping nobody was going to yell at me to leave the room or anything. A few minutes pass and my Nana says, "Jack, if you really think you hurt someone, you should talk to the police. Just tell them what you told me, and they will find out what happened." Jack said that he did want to find out, and that he was terrified he had hurt someone. He said that he deserved to be put away if he had hurt somebody, and that he didn't want to run away from it. Later that day, Jack was arrested. It turned out that he had gotten drunk and decided to shoot that neighbor that he had a feud with. He had gotten his gun and prepared to murder the guy. He had walked down his long driveway, turning in the direction he thought the guy lived. He had gone the wrong way. The man who answered the door was just a local guy that didn't even know Jack. Jack, in his drunken stupor, fired when the door was open. The man was shot in the chest with a shotgun and died on his doorstep.
For reference, I am a female, and I am 18 years old. This encounter happened to me when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and it still freaks me out to think about it. The neighborhood I lived in was quite a tight community. Everyone knew everyone, and all the kids played together in the street, no matter how old they were. One day, all of the neighbor kids and myself were playing in the street like we usually did. That was until the oldest of us, Marina, being 13 at the time, looked down the road to see a man watching us play. Looking back at it now, it was clear that the man was homeless, but at the time, I just thought he smelled really weird. Marina started to get creeped out, as the rest of us didn't understand the strange character of the man. Marina, who was riding a bike at the time, rode up to the guy and asked him what he was doing. The guy said nothing. Marina wanted to go inside and tell her mom, but the guy was standing outside her house and she didn't want to go near him. So she went to the scariest person who lived on her street to sort the guy out, my mom. My mom is short, pretty, and quite innocent when you look at her, but in reality, she was kind of a Jack Russell. Highly territorial and would happily rip the shit out of you to protect her area. One thing I forgot to mention, the street we lived on was part of a cross junction, and on the opposite side to our street was Woolwich Estates. For those who don't know what that is, it's the most dangerous estate in London. So my mom being the scariest person out of the lot was a big deal. So my mom came out of the house effing and blinding as she was stomping up to this man. By this noise, all of the neighborhood was watching and all of the parents came out fuming, but this guy just stood there and didn't speak. My mom then shouted to my older sister to call the police, which my sister did. This guy had never looked at any of us directly, so it all gave us a bit of a jump when he stared into my mother's eyes. My mother was determined to stand her ground and added to this as my mom screamed, "Fuck off," right in this guy's face. The guy then turned around and walked off without saying a word. The police came, my mom told them everything as well.
What if it's not a someone, but a something? This happened to me last night, and it was the scariest moment of my life. I went to my friend's house with some other friends. The only relevant friends in this story are Alex, Maddie, and Michael. So we're at our friend's house, and then he says we have to leave by 10:30 p.m. So 10:30 rolls around, and we decide to go to my house. Alex is driving us back, and my neighborhood is considered to be super safe, but we didn't feel safe. We go into the backyard because we have a fire pit back there. Adjacent to the fire pit is a gate on the side of the house where we keep our trash cans in the side yard. It wasn't trash day, nor the day before trash day, so we usually keep the gate closed, but it was open. I didn't think much of it until about 20 minutes after turning on the fire. One of my dogs, Bo, who was a Bichon Frise, entered into the side yard. I didn't care because on the other end is another gate which was closed, so she couldn't escape. Now on the opposite side where we are, there is another side yard, but there is no gate. We keep our old bikes and old toys there. I heard something digging or scratching. I don't really know how to describe it, but I thought it was my other dog, Pepper, who was a cockapoo. I get up and turn on my phone flashlight and walk over to the side yard. At this point, the noise stopped. I slowly walked over there, and my friends kept saying, "What are you doing?" But I didn't respond. I turned the corner, and nothing was there, so I assumed it was a raccoon who had just jumped the fence. Mother dog Bo comes back from the side yard with the gate, and in her mouth was a tissue that was bloody. It freaked us out, but Michael said that somebody probably had a bloody nose. Again, we didn't think much of it. Now we're all talking, and then I see the light in my brother's room go on. My brother left for college a few weeks ago, and last I remembered he didn't have a car and was currently being hazed, so there was no way he was home. I looked up, and I get this weird feeling that someone is watching us from the window. I look in, but I see nothing, and then the lights turn off. And here's where it gets freaky. Alex starts freaking out, saying he saw something peeping over the fence from my neighbor's house. My neighbor that lives there is Esteban and his mom. Esteban is one of our close friends, but he was at his dad's house in LA, and his mom is usually gone. So we turn off the fire and go inside. I shut all the windows and turn off the lights in the background. We decide to watch some Netflix. We were watching, and then Maddie went to use the restroom. She came running out because she said she saw something run past the window. Everyone, feeling very freaked out, decides to leave. I went to bed, and around 2:30 a.m. I woke up to Pepper barking. Now Pepper barks at anything, but the way she was barking sounded oddly strange. It sounded like a human barking. I peep around the corner of my bedroom because my bedroom is parallel to the stairs, and I see Pepper halfway down the stairs barking at something. At the top of the stairs is my other dog, Bo, just sitting there. It really freaked me out, and after 10 minutes it stopped. So I woke up about an hour ago and mentioned the dog barking to my dad, and he said he heard it too, so much so that he was freaked out and hasn't moved since. Now I just got a text from my friend Alex about 20 minutes ago, stating, what if it's not a someone, but a something?
Very brief but unsettling experience I had about 5 years ago. My girlfriend at the time had a cottage we'd visit every chance we got. A 2-hour drive up north ended with us turning down the old familiar dirt road that led to her cottage. The land this dirt road was on split into 3 properties. A dirt road split off near the main entrance that led to their first neighbor's cottage. The remaining 2 were further down. The end of the dirt road turned into her cottage, and another path off theirs led to the final cottage. We were out by the fork in the road, with a fire going around midnight, drinking and chatting. This being country, we were surrounded by total darkness, our only light source being the fire we had started. Footsteps started to sound from the road in the darkness, turning our laughter into silence. Out of the black comes a man, in black pants and a black hoodie, with the hood up. The only distinguishable feature was he was a white male. This startled us, as we knew no one was up at the neighbor's cottage this weekend. The man proceeded to walk through our sight, illuminated by firelight, up towards the neighbor's cottage, ignoring our greetings and pleasantries. He carried on and disappeared into the darkness. I am in no way insinuating this was a paranormal encounter. No ghost or spirit was haunting us. No angry entity trying to scare us. This was some guy we've never seen before walking down a pitch-black road and passing through our property. There's no town in either direction for miles, so where the hell did he come from? We returned to our drinks and chatted before slowly making our way to bed. Nothing else happened that night. No attempted break-ins, no creeping around our cottage, silent through the night. The next morning, groggy and sporting a massive headache, I headed up to the neighbor's cottage to check out any signs of the guy we had seen. Some light impressions in the ground and footprints heading up to the cottage, that was it. The rest of the weekend went great, and then we headed home. The drive home gave me time to mull it all over. Who was that guy? Where was he going? Where did he come from? Why did he ignore us? I never experienced anything odd up there after that. Weird, huh?
Number 1.
When I was younger, each summer and almost every New Year, my family would pack the car and we would go on a road trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas at around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination the next morning at around 2 a.m. So we crossed into Mexico. That's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside the car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of cactuses. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still had a few more hours to drive, and I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious of what was around me because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in the car. Suddenly, my mum spoke suddenly and said my dad's name. I hear her. Manuel. That car behind us. He's been there since we left Liardo. My dad peeked at the car, shrugging it off as nothing, trying to lower my mother's tension. A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Renzo or another city. After he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mum kept a very wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings were hyper aware of the car and the entertainment of watching the car. It was weird. We saw the car through the gaps of the luggage that blocked the rear window. It was always trailing us, and sometimes it was getting closer, then creeping back again. We got tired quickly, but then my mum said, "He's getting closer," and we turned to watch as the car inched closer towards our one. "He's close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, on such a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, with only a few hours until daylight. It was downright scary. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop. He didn't speed either, he just drove. But the car, it kept following us. The next 30 minutes were the most tense I've ever experienced in my life. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding headlights against our ones once more. Like he knew he was freaking us out and enjoyed this. It was during one of these periods that the car had pulled away that Mum spotted a police car parked ahead on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. "Pull over, right in front of the police car. Pull over right now, Miguel." And he did so. The car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park right in front of his car. The policeman came over and asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything that was happening. The car, the way it followed us, the way it taunted us. The police took her claim seriously and told us that people were victimised and had their cars stolen on the empty highways by thugs and criminals. He then offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, until about 10 minutes later when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words to my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pull over to the side of the road, waiting. It had been there. If it wasn't that for the police car there, God knows what would have happened.
Number 2. At the end of May 1999, I was headed into my freshman year of high school. That summer, me and a group of 6 girls from my church went on a missions trip up to the coast of Riverside, California, to Mount St. Helens, Washington. 3 of the girls' mothers acted as our drivers and chaperones. We basically all piled into an old Chevy van and a station wagon, headed up PCH, and had the trip of a lifetime. I got baptized at a historic mission in San Luis Obispo. We spent 3 days in San Francisco, saw the Capitol, Portland, Oregon, Yosemite. Basically, we got to see every worthy landmark and stay in every noteworthy town from the SoCal to the Canadian border. When we stayed in Yosemite National Park, we spent 3 nights at the Cedar Lodge. While in Yosemite and sightseeing, the old Chevy van died in the middle of nowhere. Luckily, even though we were unable to get a cell signal, within an hour somebody stopped and helped us. This was so long ago I don't remember all the details, but basically the owner of the van told us later that the mechanic told her that somebody tampered with the engine. She was very upset by this and said that it was something that was done intentionally. The van had to be abandoned, and we had to use a rental the rest of the way. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but turns out that Carrie Anthony Stainer, aka the Yosemite Killer, was the maintenance man for the Cedar Lodge during this time. He had murdered and decapitated a park ranger by the time we were guests at the lodge. The very next month, he gained access to a room where a woman and her young daughter and her daughter's young friend were staying under the guise of checking the room for something. Basically, he knocked on the door in the middle of the night, and because he worked for the lodge, they opened the door. He abducted them, then raped and murdered and decapitated them. I can't say that I remember seeing him, but we probably did as we were there for 3 nights. It's just one of those things that I look back on and think he could have easily knocked on one of our doors, as it was just a few weeks before, and decided he wanted to abduct and kill us. I feel incredibly lucky, like I dodged a bullet. If the time frame wasn't so close, it wouldn't creep me out as much. But it continues to haunt me 16 years later. Number 3.
Ever since I was younger, I've had the most terrible fear of being around windows after dark. It starts out as an uneasy feeling, a queasiness which I cannot suppress. Then comes a hyper-awareness. I can consciously feel it, but I suddenly hear every little sound. The fear moves into my lungs, burning, but my fingers are numb with cold. I'm frozen in place. The fear is surging through my veins, oozing out of my pores. The small hairs on the back of my neck begin to stand up, and I feel the need to bolt. Suddenly, I'm standing in the kitchen drinking a glass of water, reassuring myself that there's nothing to fear but fear itself. This isn't a one-time thing though. I'm 25 years old and I still lose my shit every time I'm near a window without blinds after dark. I've tried to conquer my fear, but at this point, I've just chalked it up to being a quirk. As a child, I was never afraid of the dark, monsters under my bed. In fact, in order to avoid the windows, I would often sleep under my bed with the determination to show my parents that something was wrong. Sometimes they would check in on me, and as soon as I saw their silhouette, I would have a full-blown panic. They even thought I got kidnapped once. As a strongly independent child, I never told them about my fear until recently. My mother and I had been talking about spooky things. I love it when she tells me her ghost stories, especially because how few and far between they are. But every now and then I get lucky. I do enjoy so much hearing about the creepy and paranormal. In the heat of the moment, I told my mother that I haven't really experienced any ghosts, but I had some weird dreams and this really strange fear which was paralysing of windows at night. Boy, I wish she just continued with her ghost stories. My mother looked me dead in the face. She paused for a moment before responding. When you were little, we had to put blinds on your windows. At first we didn't. The trees in front were thick enough that a passing car couldn't see through it. One night we got a call from Anthony and Mike from the church. They were driving home from Bible study when they passed your window. They told us that their headlights illuminated a man standing there in the street watching you through your window. Just a plain stare, one that couldn't be broken. They called us when they arrived home and we immediately called the police, but the man was gone. By the time the police arrived, they hadn't found anything either, other than one part of a camera cartridge on the floor. We never told you because we didn't want to scare you. So that man stood on the street corner probably every night when I was a kid, just staring at me, watching.
Number 4. This happened to myself and a close friend, both 23-year-old males, just last month. We decided to go up on a 2-night backpacking camping trip in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. We are both very comfortable with nature and spend a lot of time camping, hunting, fishing, etc. We hiked about 5 miles in a small lake and set up camp on a small beach. This is not a heavily trafficked area, and we didn't expect to run into anyone. Our first night there, as we were sitting around the fire, we saw a flashlight moving on the other side of the lake around 10:30. This was fairly unusual. However, we did not think too much of it. But as time went on, this flashlight kept moving around the lake, getting closer to our campsite. We kept discussing who could possibly be wandering around the woods in the middle of the night, and we didn't particularly want an unwelcome guest. Once it was clear that the person, or people, were heading for our campsite, we moved off into the woods nearby to see who wandered up. I took a small axe with me, and he had a .22 rifle. Now, we weren't expecting trouble, and we certainly didn't want to make any, but we figured we might as well cover our bases. Now, the moment of truth. The flashlight comes near the light of our fire, and it is one man. He has a beard and is probably in his mid-40s. The scary part was he was carrying what turned out to be a pump-action shotgun. He walked around the campsite a few times and then proceeded to enter our tent. After rummaging around for a minute or so, he came out and started yelling, "I know you're out there. Why don't you come out and say hello?" My friend and I remained motionless under a hemlock tree about 50 yards away. That is when the man proceeded to fire his shotgun into the woods, not too far from where we were. He also swung his flashlight around several times. After what felt like hours, he grabbed my friend's backpack and a few articles of clothing we had drying off near the fire and threw them in to burn. My friend, who had aimed the .22 at the man, asked me if he should shoot. I told him absolutely not, unless he spots us and starts to point the gun in our direction. Thankfully, the man moved off from where he had come after a little while. We waited until his flashlight was on the other side of the lake, ran out, grabbed everything we could fit into my pack, and took off. It was now around 2 or 3 a.m. We ran out of the trail with flashlights and made it back to my car as the sun was coming up. We immediately went to the police department and reported it, where we also spoke with some forest rangers. And that was it. I haven't heard anything back from the police. It wasn't mysterious. However, it creeped the hell out of both of us. Number 1. I am a male, and am now 30 years old. My family moved to the States when I turned 14, but I grew up in Russia in a small town called Kirov. It was big enough to house a full spread of criminal activity, from organized crime to cannibalistic hobos. These few stories are not tied together with anything else other than a cultural connection. Brief, absolutely true, and hopefully will give you a small glimpse of the state the country was in the 1990s, right after the collapse. When I was very little, we lived in a typical Russian 5-story apartment building in a, what would be considered, middle-class neighborhood. It was fairly quiet, with nothing much happening, so us kids could play outside for as long as we wanted without adult supervision. I remember a man living on the first floor of our building, his kitchen window overlooking the staircase which ran out onto the sidewalk. He was probably in his mid to late 30s, always wearing a dirty wife beater, never a clean shave. Every time it seemed, as I would walk or ride my bike by his window, he would be sitting there, sometimes a glass of milk in hand. He then would jump up from his chair and begin to yell and shout as loud as he could at me, swearing, calling me names, threatening. All of this he would do with excessive violent movements and facial expressions. As a 4-year-old kid, I would just stand there in horror, watching him do his crazy, murderous acting. He would fall on his elbows on the windowsill and shake his head, feverishly spitting out curses and deathly threats at me, his eyes bulging. He would punch his chest with all his strength, and almost in tears of some deep rage would announce of his hatred towards me and how much he wished me dead. And if that wasn't enough, he would then pretend to be going for the door, as if finally having found the resolution to go through with it, then coming back to the window, and more shouting, more threats. I just remember never being able to stand to stay there for the horror that overtook me, and I would always run in the end, leaving the crazy man just staring at me out of his window. One day, he was just gone, disappeared. No more insane man in the window. Being a kid, I just moved on with my life and didn't think about the matter for years. Until much later, I told my parents about him and what he did for the first time. The story they told me confirmed my suspicions of his true nature. Around the same time as one of the last that I've seen him, a strange occurrence happened in our city. Body parts were found scattered throughout it, all far from each other, and all belonging to one unfortunate man whose wife plotted to kill him for the sake of acquiring his apartment and belongings. Her brother happened to be the freak living downstairs, who both violently killed the husband, dismembering his body in a tub, and distributed the pieces, including the head, all throughout town. Everything led to the wife, and it didn't take her long to blame the entire adventure on her dear brother, who, to this day, is sleeping in some dark cell, far away in the cold. When I was in 8th grade, my school started to have roof problems. It was an old building which used to belong to some merchant who lived back in the day of the czars, and every year it seemed to give more and more, until it finally gave a class full of students the ceiling falling on their heads. For the time it would take to restore the building, the student body would attend classes in public school number 22. I still remember it clearly. A fortress of bad behavior bordering homicide. The students of number 22 mostly came from awful circumstances and enjoyed humiliation, severe beatings, just any kind of abuse. At that time, street fighting was also very common in the country, and the fights rarely ended with just a black eye or a busted lip. Broken bones, skull fractures, coma, and death were routine. One day, as my friends and I were talking in a hallway between classes, a big, bald kid came up to us with his entourage of hopeless degenerates. He told us how they had had enough of us and were planning to beat the life out of any boy from our school once classes were over. They didn't like us from the start because our school was considered preppy, and they acted as if we were intruding on their territory. He told us they were all going to be there, and it was gearing up to be a great show. We knew immediately he meant what he said, as this guy held a certain authority in that dark place, and most kids were afraid of him. He was one of those people who learned to swing at anyone who did anything as much as annoy him. And he wasn't alone. They were many. We told our teachers what he said, and they let us go secretly 20 minutes before the class was over. My friends and I all banded together as we got dressed for the winter day outside and left the school. The plan was to stick together and walk to the bus stop. I got on my bus and stood by the window. The route led right by the school, and I would be able to see the courtyard in front of the main entrance and what could be happening there. As we were driving by, what I saw became etched in my mind for the rest of my life. On the white snow, in the clearing before the large doors of number 22, was an assembly of 200 to 250 mostly male figures dressed in black colors and forming a giant circle. In the middle of the circle, I could see a fight underway. Just two of them, one with his arms thrown open as if taunting his opponent, and the other, someone who did not look like they wanted to be there. This turned out to be a big operation on their part, as it looked like more were invited to what was being planned. I later learned that once they found out we left early, as the final bell rang, all of my classmates and I were already gone. They decided to beat on their own, and some poor kid was picked and beat so hard he ended up in an ICU. Since my school was very small in numbers, and some parents altogether decided to homeschool their kids for the time of the repairs, we would have had easily been outnumbered 10 to 1. I hate to think what would have happened if our teachers did not let us out early that day. On the next day, armed security was on the school premises, and they stayed there until we were able to attend our old, but now dearly loved home of a dead merchant. Going back to a time when I was a kid, this last story is my personal claim to victory in the game of life or death, which happens to fall in our hands from time to time for no apparent reason at all. I was maybe 9 at the time. We moved to a better area, more space, better location. Our apartment was on the last, 6th floor and the last one on the landing. It was the furthest you could go from the entrance of the building and fairly secluded. The staircase was also completely indoors, essentially housing anyone who entered in a climb, floor after floor, with 4 apartments to a landing. This day I came home from school around 2 p.m. My parents weren't due back home for at least 3 hours, and I set about doing my usual homework, watching TV, and emptying the fridge. It was around the time I settled in for an episode of Babylon 5, a plate with a bit of everything on my lap, that I heard the front doorbell ring. This was very odd, as my parents both had their key, and no one else usually visited around this time of day. I went over to the front door and asked, "Who is it?" I heard a man answer back, "Hi there. I'm from the electrical company. We're doing a routine check of the electric meters. May I come in and inspect yours? It'll only take a minute." I looked through the people and saw a young man, probably nearing 30, very clean, neatly dressed, with his hair combed to the side. He even held a clipboard in his hand with some papers attached. I was about to twist open the lock when I saw something. Because of the fisheye view I had on the landing, I could also see a little extra to the sides. On my left, the man's right, I saw light bouncing from what looked like a sharp metal object. Then for a second, I clearly saw what it was: the cutting edge of an axe. Someone was standing to the right of the door, attempting to hide from view, holding an axe. At this point, my memory gets blurry. I remember getting away from the door and creeping into my room, which was the farthest in the hallway, closing the door and not coming out until my parents got back. The bell kept ringing for a few more minutes, and then it finally fell silent. Number 2.
Power outages in my 2-story apartment were very common due to the fact that my apartment is shitty. So I was not shocked when it went off one night while on my phone. Little backstory, I was hearing strange shuffling and light footsteps upstairs, so I was a tiny bit unsettled. My brother Alex was out on the porch, so he wasn't really aware of the power outage. Anyway, what happened was it just went off. When I got up to go tell Alex, something came from up the stairs, speeding down, then almost sprinting down while trying to stay careful. I was scared. I dropped my phone. The only light supplied was the street light near my apartment that shined in from the window. I stood still the whole time to make sure whatever the thing was didn't see me. I heard footsteps around me, but nothing. My brother then waltzed in and asked what happened in a loud tone. Whatever was there sprinted towards the door, pushing Alex to the ground and leaving the door wide open. Puzzled, my brother got up and tried to chase after it, but it was long gone by the time he realized what just happened. Me and Alex moved out and now live in separate houses, but it still freaks me out sometimes when the power shuts off. Now, I don't ask any of you to believe me. I have no proof because me and my brother decided instead of calling the police, we call the landlord. Well, strange creature that knocked my brother down and probably didn't have good intentions. Let's not meet. Ever.
Number 3. This is the story of me, my baby daughter, and an older Italian gentleman who became our guardian angel. 6 months ago, I gave birth to a little girl, Clea. Her father and I were over the moon that she had finally arrived, but the process of getting her here was gruesome. I'm a small woman, and she was a surprisingly big baby, almost 10 pounds. A very cute, precious, almost 10-pound baby, but it made for a hard delivery. 7 hours into labor with no signs of progress, meconium, signs of fetal distress, showed up, and I was whisked into an emergency C-section. We were finally sent home 3 days later with a bill of good health, but my recovery was slow and painful. I ended up having to take a much longer than standard maternity leave. Clea and I, mainly me, slowly made our way to feeling good, and about 2 months ago, I felt up to snuggling her into the baby sling and walking the 4 blocks to our yoga studio for a very simple mommy and me classes every Tuesday. The real treat was afterwards at the Dunkin' Donuts next door, where I would get a smoothie. Vinod is a 60-year-old man who works behind the counter, always telling me how bright I made his day. He loves seeing me smile, and one day I was going to have to ditch my rotten husband to come back to India with him. This was said in a playful context and wasn't creepy at all. He adored Clea. She's one of those babies that has rolls all over, and was always saying how big and healthy she looked. Promised when she got old enough to eat real food, he would give her as many munchkins as she wanted. The day Clea turned 5 months was a Tuesday. We headed to yoga, and then to visit Vinod, who as usual cooed at the baby in Gujarati, and gave me a free smoothie for being such a good mom at only 5 months, if he could see the state of my house. We said our goodbyes, and I, in a rare moment of absent-mindedness, decided I'm going to take the alley shortcut across the street to get to the block I needed to be on. It was such a bright day, the alley only a little shadowy, and it was less than 14 feet long. I didn't even have a concern in my mind, and I know that's incredibly, incredibly stupid. I made it past the garage cans when I felt something cold against my shoulder blade. Turning around, I saw a man with what looked like a stun gun pointed in my direction. "Your wallet. Give me that. Give me your rings, your earrings, your phone. Anything of value on you is mine now." I didn't know what to do, so I started sobbing as I shakily reached for my shoulder bag. He pressed the stun gun into the side of my abdomen. "Quiet. I'll use this. I don't care about the baby. I don't care about..." I never found out what he didn't care about, because the corner of my eye suddenly filled with a flash of brown, pink, and orange. It was Vinod, armed with one of those handled trays the employees use to slide bagels into the oven. He got in one good hit, and the man was off like a shot. I'm shaking and crying. Clea is wailing, and Vinod, well, I was afraid he would keel over. Red, panting, and looking around all wild-eyed. Walk me back to the shop to call the police and my husband. Nothing ever turned up, but Vinod has my undying gratitude and appreciation for saving me in a moment of stupidity that went terribly wrong. Whatever major holiday it is, I don't care if he doesn't celebrate it, he gets a present from Clea. He deserves more than that, but I just don't know how to thank him to the degree he deserves. So Ali Mugger, let's not meet again. And also, watch out for Vinod. Number 4.
So this happened to me about 9 or 10 years ago, but I will never forget it. At the time, I was about 11 or 12. I was a competitive softball player, and my team was nationally ranked, so we traveled all over the United States to play. This resulted in long car rides, sometimes through the night. One night in particular, it was about midnight, and we were on our way to a tournament in who knows where. I had been sleeping in the car when we stopped at a gas station for a bathroom break. My teammate, who was also around 9 or 10, and I decided to stay in the car while our moms went inside because we really didn't have to go. A few moments after the moms had left, locking us in the car, I noticed another car in the parking lot. It was a few spaces over and was the only other car at the station at the time. I noticed a middle-aged man and a little girl who was about 6 to 8 years old, who I assumed was his daughter because she looked strikingly similar to him, in this car. I met eyes with the daughter and she smiled at me. I smiled back and waved because she was adorable. The little girl then said something to the man and he looked at me and smiled too. I went back to minding my own business as the man went into the store and left his daughter in the car. When I looked back at the little girl, she was looking at me with a scared look on her face. She started hitting the windows and motioning for me to come over to the car. Instantly, my adrenaline went into overdrive. This girl was really acting like she needed my help. My mind was racing. What if this man had kidnapped her and she needed my help? My initial thought was that he was her father, but you never know. I just had no idea what to do. I turned to my friend, who had gone back to sleep, and tried to wake her, but she just shot me a dirty look and went back to sleep. Turning back to the girl, I was about to get out of the car to go talk to her when I saw that she had made eye contact with the man in the store, who was just standing there watching through the window. He smiled at her and nodded, seemingly approvingly. She smiled back and then turned to me and instantly went back to trying to get me to come over to the car. After seeing that exchange, I thought something was off. It seemed this girl was acting at the direction of the man. I then decided I was not getting out of the car and would just tell my mom about it when she got back because, hey, I was aware that I was a little girl myself, and what the heck could I do? Next thing I know, the man was returning to the car. He hadn't bought anything, and had basically been standing in the window watching the whole time. When he got in the car, they started having a conversation, occasionally glancing at me. Eventually, the little girl shrugged, and he kind of patted her on the shoulder. They started to pull out of the parking lot, and I glanced at the girl one last time, and saw she was looking right at me with this huge smile. I was so creeped out, but didn't tell my mom when she returned to the car because I was still so confused and shocked about what had just happened. For a little bit, I didn't tell anyone, because I felt bad that I hadn't done anything when that girl could have actually been in trouble. But thinking back after I had gotten over the initial shock, I concluded that the man was using his daughter to try and lure me to the car by making me believe she was in some type of trouble. Who knows what would have happened next? But my guess is he would have run out from his watching spot and put me in the car and drove off with me. The creepiest thing is it seemed so orchestrated. I was sure this was not the first time they had done this. So, creepy man and his equally creepy daughter, let's not meet.
as his presence made me feel uncomfortable immediately. He was a middle-aged man, roughly 5. I went straight to my bicycle and sped off, all the while on the phone to my mom, telling her all about it.
And headed out the house. When I arrived at the store, I found myself a sweet pair of Air Jordans. I made my purchase and began the walk back home. I had developed earlier than most females, so catcalls from men driving past was something that, though I never enjoyed, I'd grown accustomed to the previous year. About halfway home, a Jeep passed me, and the teenage male in the passenger right. I was thinking, I must be mistaken. Who would just say something like that? Who would be so bold as to abduct a 12-year-old girl in broad daylight on a busy day. I figured she couldn't hear the telephone over the sound of the lawnmower. I sat in the apartment for another 15 minutes, and he hadn't driven by. story about my mom yesterday, but decided to write another, this time about me. But I gave a book to my friend and left him a note, jokingly mentioning that if something happened to me, start searching from here. After that, twice in the metro,
here. What made me pull over to investigate was probably a combination of curiosity and concern but I can't say for Number 1. When I was 16 years old, my dad started telling me about the middle of the night phone calls. The caller would get my dad on the line, ask for me, and when he didn't get me, he would start telling my dad the rudest, most vile things about me. I didn't know who was calling or why, and I never woke up when the phone rang. I wish I could sleep like that now. So I never spoke with this guy. Fast forward, and I'm 22, fresh out of the military, and landed at home for a year while I start college, get a job, and save money. This time I hear the phone ring in the middle of the night. Dad mentions the phone calls tapered off while I was away, which was 4 years, but have started again. One day, I'm at home and I get a phone call around noon. Some guy, I don't recognize his voice, asks for me, and I say, "Speaking?" He proceeds to ask if I remember doing all sorts of sexual acts and describes some stuff before I hang up. I am rattled, because I always thought if I could hear his voice, I would know who it was. I called the police, who came out to take my statement. This was just a year or so before caller ID became available in my city. They told me how to get the call traced next time, gave me a case number. I moved into my own apartment about a year later, got my name listed in the phone book. Before the internet, this was a big deal. One day, a few months after I moved in, I have a message on my answering machine. "Hello. I think you know who this is. Still." Click. I promptly asked for an unlisted number, and I was one of the first people to get residential caller ID in the city of Seattle. But as far as I know, he never called again. Number 2. So this just happened. A bit of background of the last 25 minutes. I just got home from a reasonably big night. It's 4:30 a.m. and stinking hot in this part of Australia right now. I walked in the door and opened the fridge and was so happy to find 3 icy cold beers in the fridge. I take 2 of them and walk upstairs to bed to read and drink myself into a boozy sleep. First issue. The beers are not twist tops. They need a bottle opener. And after some sloppy drunken attempts at using the handle of the drawer of my bedside table, I head back downstairs to use an actual bottle opener. I turn on the kitchen lights, which are so bright that they make the space behind my eyes burn. I squint around to find the bottle opener, which I can't find, so I use the solid edge of a large kitchen knife. It's a risky choice, but the bottle cap is now off the beer and I'm happy. I turn off the alien blinding kitchen light and go to head upstairs. But something through the front window of my house that looks onto the street catches my eye. I stop at the bottom of the stairs, and all the hairs on the back of my neck and arms stand up. I turn my head slowly, and my eyes and brain are trying to make sense of what I'm actually looking at. It looks like a rain-drenched woman in a fancy white dress gazing at me through the window. Oh, fuck. It actually is. I pause and take the longest inhale of my life. She's glaring at me like she hates me. She has mascara running down her face and she is drenched from the rain. Her arms are extended and she's leaning her head towards me like her body language was trying to say, "Look at me. Look at what you've done." I'm shitting bricks, but the rational side of my brain kicks in and I think, shit, is she okay? Does she need help? I slowly walk over to the window, her gaze still locked onto mine. We are now literally within 1 meter of each other. I state loudly through the glass, "Are you okay? Do you need help? Is anyone with you?" Then it dawns on me. My gate is locked, and there is an 8-foot-high fence which is very difficult to climb. How did she get in? She doesn't respond to my inquiry. She just keeps that hateful look in her eyes. We stood there for about another 30 seconds. I was looking around nervously, trying to make sense of this, and she was just glaring into my soul. And then she finally opened her mouth as if to say something finally. But it wasn't words that came out of her mouth. It was an insanely high-pitched meow. And then she starts clawing at the window with her novelty-sized fingernails. What the fuck? I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. She's clearly not very well. Not very well at all. Then in the background behind the fence, I see another woman, 20-something, dressed in a short black club dress with a glow of her phone lighting up her face. She sees the woman in white at my window and yells, "Michelle, you pissed bitch, that's the wrong fucking house." The rain-soaked nightmare Catwoman's eyes go from, "I hate you and want you to die," to, "Oh my god, I'm so embarrassed." And she runs over to the fence, and impressively Army Commando flings herself over it. I can then hear a group of ladies pissing themselves laughing, saying how, "Jason's house is number 25, not 23, you fucking idiot. That poor guy is probably going to call the cops now." All I know is that I am so happy that I was on the receiving end of a misdirected prank, and I didn't have to be killed by a well-dressed hybrid cat demon woman. And now, I have to go back down to the kitchen to open my other beer. But I'm still too afraid. Number 3. When I was 18 years old, I worked as a lifeguard in Toronto, Canada. I had been doing this job for 2 years and worked a lot at different pools. I had picked up this shift that was every Friday night, 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. during the winter season, also known as the loser shift for people who don't have anything fun to do on Friday nights. In early December, I was the only one left in the pool building on my Friday night shift at about 10:30 p.m. The pool building is attached to a main community center that has an ice rink and a gym in it, but the pool building has a completely different entrance and parking lot than the community center. Anyway, I was about to lock up and drop the key off at the main building when I saw a girl waiting outside in the parking lot. She was about 10 years old, and I recognized her as one of the people who came for free swim during my shift. I was just about to ask her if she wanted to come wait inside because it was freezing outside when the phone rang. I went back into the staff office to answer the call, and after I was done, the girl was gone. I assumed her parents had come to pick her up or something logical. I then grabbed my stuff, turned the lights off, and locked the door to drop the key off and then walk home. I was walking across the parking lot for about 15 meters when I heard a faint, muffled scream. I turned around quickly and saw a truck idling at the far end of the parking lot. It was kind of far away, and I had to squint my eyes to see what was going on. To my horror, I realized a man was bent over and struggling to get something into his truck. I moved a little closer towards the truck and saw that the man was wearing all black and had a scarf covering half his face. Then I saw a girl's arm trying to hold the trunk open while the man was trying to shut it. She had her legs sticking out of the trunk too, kicking and also holding the trunk door open. I recognized her as the girl that was waiting outside before. I noticed her bright pink winter jacket. 2 seconds after I realized what was going on, I started panicking and looking for my phone in my bag. The parking lot was completely empty other than that one truck. It was dimly lit and the ground was very icy. I looked up once I found my phone at the bottom of my bag. The man stopped struggling to get the girl into the trunk and turned to face me. As quickly as I possibly could, I turned around and started running back towards the pool door. I looked over my shoulder while I was cautiously running, trying not to slip on the ice. He was charging towards me. I was about 10 meters away from the door, and he had gotten significantly closer to me. I started screaming, but it was hard to scream while running. I got to the door and struggled to get the keys out of my coat pocket. He was about 5 meters away when I unlocked the door and shut it behind me, then locked it. I called the cops on my phone and told the operator what was happening, and she said the police were on their way. It was terrifying to watch the man come right up at the door and try to open it, looking at me through the glass window at the top of the door. He banged on it and was yelling at me. I couldn't really hear what he was saying, though. I then gave him the finger, and then I think he realized that I was on the phone, and then he took off. It was horrifying to be behind the building door and not being able to see what was going on with the truck and the girl. I heard sirens pull into the parking lot about 5 long minutes after he left. I then felt that it was safe to open the door and walk outside. When I got outside, the girl was running towards the police cars, and the truck was nowhere in sight. Turns out that he lured her to his truck, not really sure how, and then tried to abduct her. Once he stopped banging on the pole door, he ran back to his car, threw the girl out of the trunk, then sped out of the parking lot to never be seen again. I gave the police my statement, and as far as I know, he was never caught. Number 4. This took place after I graduated high school and moved away from my family. I moved up to Alaska again, and I say again because I lived there before and attended college there. Very conveniently, my mother had been renting out her old house instead of selling it. I say conveniently because the long-standing residents had moved away, and therefore I was awarded the old house. I had to work quite a bit to keep up the payments, but my mother pitched in, thankfully. At the beginning of this story, I should make you aware that I had recently broken up with a girl who had been staying with me in the old house I was renting through my mother, and this breakup was unclean and dysfunctional, much like the relationship itself was. So it was winter break, which means I would be spending more time inside than I normally would. It was somewhat lonely in the house, being without a stable girlfriend then. Also, there's no neighbors really to speak of, as the house was an extremely wooded region a few miles out of town. One late afternoon, soon after I thought the whole breakup predicament had come to a close, I was made quite aware that it wasn't. My cell phone began ringing and ringing from an unknown number. Cliché, I know, and I decided to pick up. It was, of course, my ex. She began telling me about how great her new boyfriend is and how horrible I was and am. The sort of talk that you can almost smell the booze off the caller's breath from miles away. I actually listened until she decided to hand the phone to her boyfriend, where he was instead sounding oddly threatening, and I decided to hang up in the most polite manner possible with a "fuck you" and a "have a nice day." Days later, again with my mind beginning to forget, only this time about the most certainly drunk phone call, I'm laying on the living room couch watching some TV. While laying there, I noticed something quite unsettling. A person standing in the window behind me. How did I notice this, you ask? The reflection from the TV screen is how. I didn't move, not an inch. I had no gun, I had no knife. I had nothing but my wit and my fists. I just lay there, watching the reflection. Eventually, it moved away from the window. That normally wouldn't spook me, but I was taking into account that, 1, the house was nowhere near another, so that's a red flag, and 2, if someone was just wanting to talk, they'd knock, and 3, I was most certain it was that boyfriend of hers. Nothing became of that situation, but similar situations continued, such as a car pulling into the driveway and no one getting out and leaving inconspicuously. This was worrisome at the least, but I didn't suspect a true threat. A few days later, I'm laying in bed at night. It was very late, and I was getting ready to sleep. I get another call from an unknown number. It's her, but this time she's asking me to come outside and come see her because she wants to deliver an apology. At this time I was thinking, oh, shall we say, fuck off, though I still went outside to see what the deal was. I opened the door, and of course it's incredibly dark. I say into the phone, "I'm outside. Come around back." With this, I begin to walk on the snow-covered ground in the darkness with my just-put-on boots. The motion light turns on as I cross the garage and the driveway. The snow masking the ground is tinted yellow by the light. I round the corner of the garage and turn my phone to see. There's a road that runs behind my house and connects to the driveway by bending, and I make my way towards the road. The snow crunches beneath my boots as I come ever closer. There's a part in the trees that allows me to walk straight to the road. Otherwise, one would have to make his way around the entirety of the driveway, and I reach this part. I ask into the phone, "Where are you?" "In the car. I can see you." I step onto the road and see her car parked a few dozen feet from me with the lights dimmed. "So what's the deal?" "I just want to talk. Come here." I approach the car and make my way around to the passenger side, and I finally see her face. She waves me in, and I go ahead and oblige, sitting down in the car. I look at her, and she says, "Look, I'm sorry. I know I've been a real bitch lately." "No, it's okay. I really wasn't good to you, and I deserve it." "I don't agree, but..." Then, of course, she abruptly stops speaking because car lights shine from behind us. Naturally, I assume it's her boyfriend, and by the look on her face, she did too. The car parks behind us, and sure enough, the boyfriend gets out and storms over to my side of the car. He yanks on the door handle, and the door swings open, and he attempts to grab me, but I grabbed his wrist and got out of the car. "What the fuck do you think you're doing with her, huh?" "We were talking. I was about to leave." "Bullshit. You're trying to fucking bang her." "Look, I'm trying to sleep. I'm in no mood to do anything." He gave me this look of utter enragement before swinging at me and, of course, missing. A little scuffle ensued, and all that happened was him swearing and eventually slipping and falling before yelling at both of us, "I'll fucking kill you." I just stood by her car as she pulled away. She gave me a lift back to the house, and I invited her in, and she obliged. It was late in the night, and I suggested she locks her car if she was going to stay the night, and she again obliged. We slept upstairs in my bed before I awoke hours later. There was a banging at the back door, and I knew this because the back door was directly below my room. She woke up too and said, "Oh my God." I stand up quickly and got to my closet and reached behind the coats that I'll never wear and grabbed my Louisville Slugger. She was sitting upright in my bed with her hands seemingly embarrassingly covering her eyes. I didn't say anything before walking down the stairs slowly, attempting to be silent. The lights were off, and there's no windows on the staircase, and the banging on the back door had audibly ceased. I held the bat tightly, making sure it didn't bang into the wall to signal my position at the time. I remember how slowly I stepped down, especially on the bottom 3 steps, which were always the creakiest. Once I reached the last step, I froze, and it still gives me chills to this day. The hardwood floors creak around the bottom of the staircase, and there was a creaking that was growing closer and closer. I raised the bat above my head, ready to slam whoever it was right on the top of the head. The creaking grew closer until I could hear it from my side, and I planned to swing as soon as it was in front of me, as the staircase opened to the left from the bottom coming up. I listened ever so carefully, holding my breath. The creaking came to my northeast, and I squeezed my hands tighter than I ever had before around the bat, waiting for it to become just north of me. The creaking grew slower and closer, and this time they were directly in front of me, and I slammed the bat down hard. I hit something hard, and whatever it was crumpled to the floor with a bang and a small flash. I turned on the light, and there he was, the boyfriend. He had shot his gun directly at the floor and left a hole in the hard wood. My ex came down the stairs and was crying profusely, muttering, I'm sorry, over and over. I called the local police station, and 4 cop cars pulled into my driveway along with an ambulance in a matter of minutes. I sat there at the base of the stairs, watching the boyfriend. He was breathing. I could tell from his chest slowly inclining and declining off the floor. I had grabbed what I think was a 9mm off the floor and kept it in my hand with the safety turned on, and I just shook my head over and over in utter disbelief. I explained the situation to the police as the paramedics rushed in and carried him out on a stretcher. All in all, I didn't get to sleep until in the afternoon later that day, after all things had been finished. He ended up actually being induced into a coma and eventually recovered, but a restraining order had already been filed in advance. My ex and I became good friends after the incident, and she never dated that guy again. I never ended up moving, though I had considered it heavily, and nothing since has happened. Number 1. So I'm headed out to my local mall a few days ago, determined to do some serious Christmas shopping. As a bit of reference, I'm only about 5'5" and quite thin. I have a shaggy pixie cut and prefer the comfort of big t-shirts and skinny jeans most of the time, so I get mistaken for a 12-year-old boy a lot more than I would like to admit. So, there I was, Christmas list in hand, and ready to take this thing on like a champ. I had more money than I had for Christmas in a long time, and I was really excited to get some excellent gifts for my best friend and my parents. I was walking along on the ground floor, headed for the stairs, when I passed this lady who was giving out hand lotions. She had a few small packets in her hand, and a larger bottle on a little table beside where she stood. Okay, cool, I think to myself. Grab a sweet-ass lotion packet and keep going. I didn't want to be rude and just keep walking, so I took the lotion and smiled in a sort of thanks for the lotion, lady kind of way. Big mistake. Before I had the opportunity to keep going, this chick grabs my wrists and let out a squeal that would hurt a banshee's ears. You keep your nails natural? Hell freaking yeah, I do. I clean for a living, so there's not much point in getting them done unless I'm going somewhere special. Sure, I said, and tried to wrench myself free. To my dismay, this lady has a hold of me like a hungry anaconda, and I knew I'd be stuck listening to her sales pitch. I was a bit confused as to why she had picked me out of the entire crowd of people walking, especially because the boots and studded jacket usually scare off potential creeps, and probably friends too, but hey. Unfortunately, all the leather and studs in the world did nothing for my baby face, so I probably still seemed easy prey for this asshole. She's all, "Look how great this makes your hands and nails," while all I could think was why she thought I cared. My hands are all scarred and calloused from various do-it-yourself mishaps and years of guitar practice, so there really isn't much that can be done for them. I attempted to get away by letting her know that I wasn't interested and that I had to get back to shopping before it got too late. She batted her eyelashes and said that, lucky me, since I was so cute, she would give me an entire set for the low price of $20 if I followed her to go get it from her stand upstairs. I had just come from the top floor of the mall, since there were exits and entrances on both floors, and I knew for a fact that the only kiosk up there was an eyebrow-threading place. Like hell I was going anywhere besides GameStop to get my little brother a new game for Christmas, so I declined. She tightened her hold and just repeated the sales pitch, this time asking me weird questions in between, trying to convince me to buy this lotion. "How old are you?" 19. "Where do you go to school?" "I graduated." "Do you have a sister?" "No." "Where's your boyfriend?" "I don't have one." I tried to tell her again, nicely, because I hate hurting people's feelings. To fuck right off and let me get back to Christmas shopping when she stared dead into my eyes and said, "Are you alone?" A million little alarms went off in my head, and I lied and told her I was there with my dad. She looked around and asked which one he was. I pointed out the most intimidating-looking guy I could find, and she launched back into trying to sell me this product at warp speed, like she was in some kind of huge hurry. I told her again, more firmly this time, that I was not spending any money on her hand lotion. She started walking off in a random direction, still holding my wrist, and insisted that I come with her to see more of the products she was selling, because surely I would want something, despite the fact that every freaking word out of my mouth said the complete opposite. I yanked my arm free and stood my ground, prepared to defend myself if she tried pulling me with her again. "I am not buying anything from you. I need to get back to shopping." Before I could even turn away, she asked me what I used to wash my face. A bit caught off guard, I told her, and she began launching a barrage of insults at me, like, "You're too pale," and "Your skin is so dry," and featuring my personal favorite, "It looks like a shedding lizard." Ouch. That hurt. I didn't put any stock in her petty attempts to insult me. People had complimented me on my skin before, and I liked the way I looked anyway. I walked away instead of throwing anything back at her and headed upstairs to finish shopping. But before I left the mall that night, I marched my dry lizard skin right over to the nearest mall cop and informed him that he had some rude-ass people working in the mall. I wasn't sure who else to tell, so I wasn't too surprised to see him scrunch up his face in confusion. I expected him to direct me to a sort of complaints desk or something similar, but nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. We don't sell that here." Well, shit. I described the woman and told him what brand of lotion she had tried to get me to purchase, but he only shook his head and told me the vendor for that particular brand had not been coming around that mall for years. On my way back out to the parking lot, I passed the spot where she had originally confronted me. There was no woman, no lotion samples, no vendor's cart. I later asked my cousin, who worked in the mall, if there was anyone selling that lotion there. She said no, and a quick peek at the mall's online directory confirmed it. I'd hate to think where we would have ended up had I followed her. Number 2.
My name is Lucy, and I'm a mother of 3 from Detroit. This happened about 10 years ago, but it still sticks out in my mind as one of the most disturbing things that has ever happened to me. It was Christmas night and about 12 PM, and my kids had literally just got to sleep. They are only 7 years old, but since it was Christmas they were so excited they got to sleep later this night. Well, at about 3 in the morning, my daughter Casey ran into the room. She started saying she could hear Santa, and of course we told her to go back to bed or Santa wouldn't deliver the presents. Well, she went back to bed and we went to sleep for an hour, and that's when my other daughter Selena came into my room. She said she could hear Santa too, and she said she could hear him coming down the chimney. Since I told them we could get up at 6 o'clock, I didn't see the point in going back to sleep and getting disturbed time after time again, so I told them that we would go up into the loft and look out the window and see if we can see Santa in his sleigh. Well, me and my husband and my 3 daughters went up in the loft and were up there. However, when we got up there, we could hear footsteps on our roof. This was very weird, but we put it down to being a cat. But to be cautious, my husband told me and my 3 daughters to go and wait in our room. When he looked down, he looked mortified. He said that he could definitely hear human footsteps. So he went downstairs and outside with a baseball bat. However, when he looked on the roof, there was nobody there. They must have got away. So he went back inside, but as my husband was coming back up the stairs, he saw something that caught his eye. He saw something red and black in the fireplace that obviously wasn't there before, and when he walked up to it, there was a dead cat in a Father Christmas costume. But not just one, 3 of them. Someone had got a ladder, climbed onto our roof, and put them down our chimney. My husband told me to come down and look at it, and it was absolutely disgusting. The cats' heads had been almost ripped off. We put them out in the backyard and disposed of them a few days after, but I'm so glad my children didn't run downstairs to see that sitting on the fireplace. It really upsets me that some people can just be this cruel.
Number 3.
This story happened to me 5 years ago, and it still bothers me that people can be this heartless. It was getting close to Christmas and I went for my jog. I'm a 35-year-old woman and I've got a family of 5. As I was running around the corner, I bumped into someone from the neighbourhood. Bearing in mind this person is notorious for being extremely weird, I was a little cautious to talk to him, but he seemed to insist on talking to me, so I guess I had to. We were just having a general conversation about life when he handed me a present. Of course I took it and said thank you, but I didn't have a gift for him because, well, why would I? I never really spoke to him. And we put it under the tree. A little background on this man. He is the type of person that would just stand outside his house all day trying to talk to people, and he had long hair, unshaven, and was generally scruffy. Everybody in the neighbourhood tried to avoid him, and nobody really knew what he did as a job. Fast forward about 5 days, it's Christmas Day, and I wake up and go downstairs. We opened all the main presents first, of course, but at the end we just had a few presents left from people we didn't really know, so we decided to open them. I said to my 5-year-old kids they can open it, and I went in the kitchen to get my phone to take a picture or a video of them opening the presents. Well, when I came back, I was utterly shocked. I saw my 5-year-old daughter open a cardboard box with candy written on the front. It looked a bit shoddy, so I took it off with my daughter, and when I looked at it, he had put blue asbestos in the box hoping that my kids would eat it. I quickly grabbed the box and put it outside, and wake my husband up and ask him what to do. 2 days later we told the neighbours, and we were the only ones to get a present off of him. Needless to say, we never spoke to him again.
Number 4. I'm a member of the slam poetry scene. Basically, it's an excuse to get people to listen to performance poetry by adding a competitive element to things. After running through the small scene in my city and wanting to branch out and push my career further, I started visiting places within driving distance that I could spit. This led me to Charlotte, North Carolina. I started at their local team venue, where you compete to be part of a squad that goes to a national competition every year. I was doing well and was accepted into the local crew pretty readily. This led to longer stays and features at some of the other venues in the city. I started going to the one that was particularly popular and good for selling CDs. That's where I met him. He worked as a barback. Occasionally he got on stage and shared, frankly shitty, poems. He was the brother of the host and everyone knew and liked him. He slowly started flirting with me more and more, although in my loose days, searching for acceptance and love everywhere, something always kept me leery. I'd gladly accept the drinks he sent over, smoke his weed with the group in a stock room between sets, and hang out at parties and events. I always had the tickle in my gut warning not to get too close, but over a year or two we continued to become friends. After a while, he started calling and texting me more often, poking me on Facebook daily, sending messages about wanting to be more than friends, that he wanted to find a snow bunny. Yes, I'm white, and he's black, and he wanted to settle down. Again, I never entertained it. There was something gnawing at me. The crazy in his eyes was too hard to miss. I eventually moved to Denver to take a position teaching poetry and work at a friend's law firm. The second Christmas I was there, I got the call. A friend from Charlotte relayed the following. He had found his white girl and gotten married. They seemed happy at first, but slowly began fighting more and more. It spilled over into the venue, and often they had to be separated by friends from physically attacking one another in public. One friend, later thinking back, remembers the last time she saw them together, him pushing his wife, followed by her throwing a drink in his face and scratching his neck deep enough to draw blood. She said after the couple had been dragged away from each other, she sat with him and smoked a cigarette. She says she laughed and said, "You guys are going to kill each other." Around Christmas last year, his wife just stopped coming to the bi-weekly events they both attended regularly. He explained it away that they were on a break. Time goes by. No one really questions that they hadn't seen or heard from her in a while, thinking she was breaking from the whole scene in order to put distance between herself and her husband. Her parents, however, hadn't heard from their daughter since the Thanksgiving dinner. They would call him, he would say everything was fine and blow them off. This continues until a week after Christmas, knowing their daughter would never miss a holiday without at least a call. They call the police, send them to the couple's home for a body check. The cops arrive, knock on the door, and are let in. They ask him where she is. He replies she's in the bedroom. He shows them to the room, and there she lay, dead for weeks, rotting in their bed. Oh, and he killed her little dog, too. During this time, he had been attending events, hosting hip-hop nights, even publishing a blog on making a marriage work on one of the local organization sites. Never once letting on that every night he was going home and sleeping with his murdered wife. The sickest part of it all, he has a child from another relationship. a daughter whom he gets to celebrate every other holiday with. That Christmas, they opened gifts, had dinner, cuddled up on the couch and watched movies, less than 100 feet from her decaying stepmother. I don't know what would have happened if I've ever taken him up on his offer to date, but I do know me and my gut are going to stay on speaking terms, and I will always listen. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 18. I was really into photography, and I would love getting into community groups and do cool stuff for our group page. About 7 months into being a part of this group, which mainly consisted of 30 to 40-year-olds and their children, a new person joined the group, and of course we all welcome him. This man was fairly old, and to be honest, he didn't look very appealing. Like a wrinklier Jack Nicholson with really wiry white hair. He asked us in group chat if we were going out on another hike soon, as he'd like to join us. The group leader and I arranged the meeting place and time. Come next weekend, all the usual people are there, and I asked if the new man had shown up yet. They all replied with no. We waited for a good 25 minutes and decided he couldn't make it. So off we hiked up this hill and started getting some cool nature shots, when all of a sudden the man we waited for emerged from the bushes. His clothes were dirty and he was silent. He didn't have a camera with him, which was a requirement when we go out to do activities like these. He said he would tag along. He made the whole group feel so uncomfortable. And keep in mind, we were far from our cars and halfway up a forest hill. The group leader quietly whispered to me that we were going to circle back. I was relieved because this guy was creeping all of us the hell out. The leader announced we were going back now, and then probably a split second after that, the man started yelling at all of us like a madman. He started raving on how he was going to skin us and skull fuck us. And then he revealed a hunting knife strapped to his belt. One of our members was ex-Navy and reacted immediately, and being the muscle of the group really showed his worth as he held this guy down and twisted his arm into a position that he could break easily if he didn't comply. He eventually calmed down, and we called the police back at the parking lot. The whole time we waited, he was saying some really cruel and nasty things he was going to do to us. And at one point, he bit the tip of his tongue off, and blood went all over his face. He did a high-pitched laugh, and then never spoke again. The sergeant came and took him away. A few days later, they found out his real name and where he lived. When the police investigated his home, they ended up finding pictures of the entire group on all of our hikes taken by this man. There must have been hundreds of photos. He found out some of our names because we would sometimes talk loudly to one another. If anything, the intentions of this man were pure evil. Number 2.
When my husband and I first moved out on our own, we had this neighbor that we would sometimes see outside and would talk to. We even went to the local pool hall and played some pool with him. One day we were all hanging out at his house and were sitting outside. The cutest little black kitten walks up in the yard. My husband and I are animal lovers, so I'm all about this kitten. My husband and the neighbor walk around the side of the house, and we're gone for maybe a minute or two. And my husband returns. The look on his face was horror and fury. He looks at me and says, "He killed that cat." I get up and walk around there, and my husband is holding this kitten. The neighbor had hit him in the head with a rock, but at this point, the kitten was breathing. It had knocked him out. Long story short, we took the kitten to the vet, and he had to have an eye removed. We've had the kitten, which we named Midnight, for about 10 years. He's good now, and one hell of a mouse killer. We found out a few years later that this neighbor had been out of town for work and was rooming with a coworker. He later went on to stab his roommate to death and returned back to his home here. It's scary to believe that someone like that lived right beside us and had been in our home and we had been in his. Obviously, after the kitten thing happened, we stopped talking to him after letting him know what we thought about it and what a piece of shit he was. So creepy ex-neighbor, let's not meet again.
Number 3.
It all happened to my father one stormy night in Glenwood, Colorado. It was the 1980s. My father was an electrical engineer just returning home from a job site. He worked long hours, and it wasn't uncommon for him to be heading home around midnight to the small cabin he shared with a friend. It was pouring rain. Lightning flashed only to illuminate the murky puddles of washed-out terrain. As my father rounded the corner upon the dirt road, he passed a large willow tree. As his headlights crossed its base, he noticed someone was crouched underneath it. It was a woman who seemed to be in her late 20s, with long tangled blonde hair. She had on fairly casual clothing, and carried a somewhat large bundle under her arms, wrapped in cloth. My father, being the gentleman that he was, decided to pull over and offered her to take shelter from the storm in his cabin just up the road. She smiled and thanked him as she got into his vehicle. She explained that she had been on a hike through the canyon that day when the storm hit, and she had been caught off guard by the rain. My dad smiled and pointed out that she wasn't exactly wearing the best clothing or shoes to go on a hike. She laughed and said that she left her place on a whim, unprepared. He asked if she needed him to dry anything, pointing to the bundle she held tightly under her arm. Her voice suddenly became very stern and stated no. When my father asked her where she lived around there, things got a little strange. She started telling my dad that she had no family or friends in the area and was quite vague when asked about details of where she lived. All she responded with was that it was too far to drive to tonight in this kind of weather. At this point, my dad said he felt something was a bit off, but chalked it up to her exhaustion from hiking and standing out in the storm for several hours. As they entered the cabin, my dad remembered that his roommate had left that morning to take a trip out of town and wouldn't be back for several days. My dad would have offered her to stay in his friend's room, but didn't feel comfortable doing so without his permission. Remember that this was the 1980s. Pocket cell phones weren't on everyone yet. My dad told her that she was welcome to sleep on the couch and dry off, as he handed her several towels. She took them from him with her right hand, but still never letting go of the bundle that she hugged under her left arm. My dad at this point realized that she had never given him a name, so he introduced himself. "Nice to meet you. My name is Mary Lou," she replied. My dad started to feel a bit more comfortable and turned on the television for her and handed over the remote. She scanned through the channels, finally deciding on a gangster flick. The scene involved a bunch of mobsters getting shot to pieces. Mary found this to be quite amusing and started to laugh in a crackling, high-pitched tone. My dad started to get a bit creeped out by this. She was enjoying it a little too much, he said. Then my dad started to ask about her life and things took a turn for the worse. When asked if she was in a relationship, she pointed down at her belt buckle and told my dad the story of her breakup. She claimed that her last boyfriend wanted to be domineering over her, and she responded by bludgeoning him half to death in his gravel driveway with her belt buckle, the same one that she was wearing. He kept saying, "Stop, please stop," and begging, but I wouldn't show him mercy, she said with a note of pride in her voice. My dad asked if he had abused her or if she was reacting defensively, and she merely scoffed and said, "No, otherwise he would be dead." My father's unease grew as the conversations progressed. She told him about her mother dying on the operating table and how the surgeon who had been working on her walked out covered in blood and said that she would be fine. "How was she supposed to be okay with all of her guts in the trash can?" she spewed, and then she laughed, glancing back at the TV screen, littered with disheveled, bullet-ridden corpses. "I love the sight of blood. It excites me. Turns me on, you know. Death. Draining them to death." At this point, my dad was officially done. He was bigger and stronger than she was, and he was quite streetwise and had seen plenty of horrors himself. But the way she spoke with a violent confidence, combined with her sure grip upon the bundle which lay under her arm, sent chills down his spine. He needed a plan. Finally, an idea popped into my father's head. "I have a friend who's a priest in town. He has access to several shelters funded by the church. You would be a lot more comfortable there instead of on our couch. They can feed you too and arrange a ride for you to get home in the morning. I can call him right now. He's only a few miles from here," he stated reassuringly. Mary Lou's tone brightened to match his. "That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much." My father smiled, hiding his relief. "Of course. It's the least I could do for you." As my dad walked over to the phone and began to dial the number, Mary Lou interrupted in a low, guttural growl.
"I hate priests. I hate priests."
She didn't yell it. She didn't scream it. She said it with a tired hatred, a clear, distinct, audible whisper, disdain from the bottom of her heart, with a unflinching resolve. My dad had enough. This wasn't a game to play anymore. This was beyond a stranger with odd tendencies. A darkness with coiled cruelty had crossed the threshold of his door. "You need to leave. You need to leave now," my dad said, pointing at the front of the cabin. "There's the door. I can't have you here and feel comfortable. I'm sorry, but the storm has stopped, and I hate to have you walk in the dark, but that's the way this has to go. Please leave." Mary Lou gazed upon him, expressionless, and finally just shrugged. My father walked her out, standing close to her in the event that the bundle concealed some type of weapon. He wasn't taking any further chances. She smiled at him as she slowly walked out onto the front porch. "Goodbye for now. I'll see you when I see you," she said calmly. With that, she walked down the long dirt road with a single streetlight upon its path. She looked back one last time before crossing the light and disappearing, enveloped by the darkness, with no trace of her to be seen. My dad called the police the next day, concerned that she may be hiding on the premises somewhere, after speaking to his girlfriend, who's now my mom, about it, and being convinced by her that she was going to cut the window screen when he was gone, hide in the house, and kill him. They found nothing and said that the area attracted a lot of transients and nomads. My father then made the mistake of telling his engineer buddies at work, which resulted in them bidding him farewell at the end of each shift in the form of asking him that he say hi to Mary Lou for them. My dad never saw her again. He still questions what could have been in that bundle that she adamantly protected. He'll never know.
Number 4. My great-grandmother was born in 1913 in Ukraine. In 1932, when she was 19, something called the Holodomor took place, which was extermination by hunger. This was recognized years later as genocide on Ukrainian people by the Soviet Union. Millions died, and as you might expect during a famine, cannibalism became rampant. It wasn't unheard of, great-grandma told me, for families to kill the youngest child in order to eat. As time passed and the famine ended, things seemed to get better, but food was still scarce. It cost a lot just for the basics: milk, eggs, bread, etc. It also took a lot of time as these things weren't easy to find. Though it happened less, great-grandma was certain that people were resorting to easier, more sinister methods to obtain food. Grandma was pregnant with my grandfather in 1936, and she wanted fresh vegetables desperately. Sort of a pregnancy craving, I guess you could say. So out she went, trekking up and down the streets. It looks like she wasn't going to have any luck, until... "Lady, you need something?" It was a small boy, about 8 years old. His cheeks were unusually full, she remembered. Most people these days had cheekbones that look like they would poke out from your face at any slight pressure. Great-grandma told the boy she wanted vegetables, and his chubby face split into a grin. He knew just the place, he told her, and gave her directions to a hovel a few blocks down. She was wary, but determined, so off she went. The hovel smelt like slaughter. She didn't think anything of it. Maybe these people had a lot of food, and she had struck a gold mine. Perhaps they would take sympathy on a pregnant woman and not charge her an astronomical price for a droopy carrot. When she pushed the curtain, acting as a door, aside and said hello, 3 things happened simultaneously. There was a man with a plank of wood raised above his head coming towards her. She caught sight of a human head laying on the table, causing her to scream, and a woman in the corner shouted, "Stop!" The woman examined my grandmother, frowning at her stomach. "The boy knows we have standards. We don't kill pregnant women. Go, leave. Do not repeat what you saw. We can change our minds." Great-grandma didn't need to be told that again. She left and came to America years later to start a cannibalism-free life. I still wonder what would have happened had they not noticed she was pregnant. Number 1. So when I was around 9 to 10 years old, I used to play football on a local team who had their outdoor practices not far from where I lived. I'm a girl, by the way. Because it wasn't that far away, me and a friend who was on the same team used to take our bikes there together. The easiest way to get there is to go on the long walking track that for a long time ago used to be where the trains went, but they later took away the train tracks and put cement on the ground. So today it's a long walking track that many dog owners love to use when walking their dogs. There are some parts along the track that has like small woods, but there are mostly houses, so you feel quite safe when you walk there at night. It is always lit up with a strong light, so you can see at least 50 meters ahead of you with no trouble. So one night, at almost 8 p.m., me and my friend were riding our bikes from practice. I have no memory of what we talked about, but just that we laughed and joked around. We were about to turn down from a sidewalk onto the long walking track, and we saw a man who came walking from the direction we were heading. I remember how slowly he walked, and how he kinda looked off, like something wasn't quite right with him. He stopped just in front of us, and just stood there, looking at us. And because it was a small uphill, we had to jump off our bikes so we could get up safely on the walking track without falling off our bikes. But he was blocking the way. I remember how quiet it got between us, and how big his eyes looked when he followed us with his gaze. When we passed him, it felt like he wanted to grab one of us, so we quickly jumped back on and continued. In the corner of my eye, I saw how he turned around, facing our way in the same direction he just came from, and then started walking behind us. It just seemed so weird, but I wasn't scared at that moment, just very uneasy. I should mention it was just us three, no one else. My friend had also noticed how weird the man acted and told me we should go a little bit faster. So that's exactly what we did. We both looked back after speeding it up a bit, and could see to our horror how he'd started half walking and half running behind us with his eyes nailed on us. "Faster!" my friend yelled, and took off with me behind. I tried to keep up with her, but fell back a little bit. I was ready to pee my pants when I looked back to see the man, with his long legs, running like a maniac, aiming directly at me. I remember how she kept yelling, "Faster! Faster! Faster!" How she kept looking back when I no longer dared to because I was so scared. That was when two older women came from a sidewalk. We finally dared to stop. And when we turned around this time, the guy had thrown himself into the woods and was nowhere to be seen. My friend told me afterwards, after we had finished crying, that the biggest reason why she kept screaming was because he was just a few inches from grabbing my bike. I can imagine what he was planning on doing with the girl he managed to catch, drag her down into one of the small woods and have his way. It just seems so odd that he took his chances with two girls at the same time. It sounds horrible to say, but I'm pretty sure my friend wouldn't have stopped if he got a hold of my bike. Number 2.
When I was about 11 years old, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with my mother. We were very poor. The bedroom had double sliding glass doors that led out to the balcony. We lived on the 3rd floor for safety and the cheaper rent that it offered. My mother often stayed in the living room late into the evening because she liked to watch TV before bed, and I preferred quiet. We had a bunk bed with a full-size mattress on the bottom and a twin on top. One night I was up in the top bunk, and my mom came into the room and called my name quietly. I'm a light sleeper, so I woke right up. She said, "There's someone on the back porch. Don't move." She was standing just outside the doorway to the room, and had stopped entering when she saw the shadow of someone behind the blinds covering the glass doors. The type of blinds that are flat when closed, but with the lights around the complex, you could see his shadow through them. I just remember being shocked that someone could get up onto a 3rd floor balcony. Then, he started to knock. Really slowly. That's when I got scared. My mom went into the kitchen and called 911. I stayed as still as I could, hoping he would just go away. It couldn't have been more than 3 minutes, but the next time I opened my eyes, he was gone. When the police arrived about 3 minutes after that, they looked all over the complex but could find no sign of him. When one of the officers went onto our balcony, there was no indication of how he'd gotten up to the 3rd floor, but there were 2 very evident palm prints where he'd leaned against the glass for who knows how long before my mom walked in. It never happened to us again. I hope it didn't happen to anyone else either.
Number 3. This happened in my old elementary school, which is pretty much right behind our house. I was walking to go and get my brother, who's 11, to come back home as I approach the park. He's nowhere in sight. I start to get a little frantic because he's a smart kid and knows danger when he sees it, but is so friendly that he'll jump to any offer to go and play video games. So at the time, I'm thinking that he may have had a close friend that he is with, so I call my mom and let her know. She said that since a year ago, nobody we knew lived in our neighborhood, and we started freaking out. As I began to look around and ask people if they saw him, one kid knew who I was and told me that he was walking with a few older teenagers to a house a few blocks down. Naturally, I start sprinting to go and see where he went. He's a gullible kid, and I'm thinking of the worst. I end up finding the house he's at, and it's an absolute shithole. There were some teenagers in the vicinity of the house, and I asked what they were doing, and one told me they were delivering a package to somebody, and that somebody was the owner of this nasty house. I freaked out. I ran and drop-kicked the door so damn hard, I broke the door off the hinges, and I ran inside to save my brother. Luckily, he was playing video games as this fucker was watching him. The man was a fat, sloppy, greasy-looking guy, the type of guy that runs a butcher shop. I immediately start yelling at my brother to get up and leave. Now I'm a big guy at 6'1" and 250 pounds, a former collegiate fullback, and as soon as I finished yelling at my brother, I get this by the neck and lift him against the wall, Michael Myers type of way. I get the guy to spill the beans and found out the situation and what happened. My brother told me that these teenagers came up and said that they knew who I was and invited my brother over to play video games. This man paid these kids to find a little boy to bring to his house so he could fondle them and sexually assault them. Possibly kidnap, or worse. I've never been so angry or scared at the same time in my life. I called the cops, and they arrest the man on charges of abduction and is now in jail. This happened 3 days ago, and I don't know how I could live with myself if my brother was killed right before Christmas time. Please watch over your siblings whenever you can, and stress to them the fact that you don't ever do anything without parental admission. That man is so lucky he didn't die, but I have too much of a future to murder a miserable, sick man like that. Greasy fuck. Let's hope you don't ever meet me again. Number 4.
In the late 70s, my mom was in her 20s and living in a brand new apartment complex in Houston, Texas. It was so brand new that the phone service wasn't even fully working yet, and her building was one of the last to get access. My mom had just gotten back from a vacation to Cancun, and so had made a pretty hefty trip to the grocery store to restock her fridge and pantry. It took her several trips to the car and back, with her unlocking and relocking her front door each time she came in or out. During her trip, she noticed that a friend of her neighbor's was waiting outside their door. My mom had seen this man, Sven, and even hung out with him and her neighbors, a young couple, several times. He was Scandinavian and quite striking and friendly. On her last trip up the stairs, Sven and my mom made eye contact once again, and he asked her, "Are they home?" with a nod to his friend's apartment. My mom replied that she didn't know. Sven explained that the three of them were meant to go to a movie, but just assumed they were running late. My mom felt bad for him, and said that she would offer for him to use her phone, but the service was out. Instead, she invited him to wait inside her apartment until her neighbors got home. My mom is a cautious woman. Even by her 20s, she had dealt with many creepy encounters. She always locked doors, always looked twice, never made herself look timid, and questioned everyone's motives. She thought that she knew Sven well enough to know that he was well-intentioned and harmless. She and Sven entered the apartment, and he made himself comfortable on her couch. My mom went to putting her groceries away and grabbed a can of soda. She called to Sven. "Do you want some Coke?" He replied, "No thanks, I brought my own." My mom peeked around the doorway to see Sven arranging lines of cocaine on her coffee table. She walked out to him, and he offered her some. She said a quick, "No, thanks," and he told her to suit herself and lowered his face to the table with a rolled-up dollar bill to his nose. My mom stood over him, watching in confused disbelief. She had come to her senses and told him, "I think you should leave." He scoffed and began to reach for her arm. She tried to pull away, but he grabbed her and began to pull her down on top of him. She ripped herself from his grip and told him, "I am a big, strong girl and I can fuck you up. I think you need to leave. Now." He gave her an amused, impressed grin and left her apartment without further trouble. As soon as Sven was gone, my mom locked her door and waited in a state of shock. After several minutes, she looked out of her window to see Sven and his shiny Excalibur parked perpendicular behind her car, effectively blocking her from leaving. Panic set in. Her phone was out. Everyone in her family and group of friends knew this. They wouldn't know to be worried when they didn't hear from her. She had no way of contacting anyone or leaving for help without Sven noticing. She waited for nearly half an hour, staring out of the window to keep an eye on Sven. Suddenly, he pulled away. My mom had her purse and keys ready and bolted out the door, ran down the stairs and jumped in her car, locking the door instantly. She thought she was home free, but as she looked in her rearview mirror to reverse, she saw the Excalibur parked behind her again, blocking her from leaving. Horror filled her as she realized that he had just circled the complex in hopes of this very thing happening. He grinned at her from his window as she struggled with what to do. She put her car in reverse, but he didn't budge. He just grinned even more, laughing to himself. Then, my mom realized that this Excalibur he was driving was worth a whole lot more than her beat-up car. She grinned back at Sven as she slammed the gas pedal, throttling her car backward as fast as it would go. Sven, fearing the damage that would come to his car, pulled out of the way quickly, leaving room for my mom to escape. My mom pulled out of the complex. Sven followed. She got onto Highway 59, a very busy freeway that went through the most populous parts of town. Sven followed. He was close behind her, swerving and changing lanes when she did. Up ahead, my mom saw traffic. She swerved in front of a car that had been braking for it, and Sven got left behind. My mom drove to her friend's house, banging on the door to let her in. They sat in her friend's apartment watching for Sven, but he never came. She had lost him. When my mom told friends and family this tale, they thought she was overreacting and embellishing the story. They knew how cautious she was, and figured it was an overactive imagination on her part. Nobody believed her fully until a few months later, when looking at a magazine rack, my mom saw Sven's face on the cover of Houston City magazine. She snatched it up and read the story. Sven, who worked at the notorious Screw magazine, had been arrested for raping multiple women. He would overpower them when they were in vulnerable positions, tie them up, rape them, and urinate on them while doing all sorts of other demeaning, humiliating acts to them. He was only convicted of raping 2 of them, but there were other victims whose cases just didn't have enough proof. Very soon after, my mom's neighbors moved out quickly and without a trace left behind. She wonders to this day if they had anything to do with Sven's antics, or if they were just as unaware as she had been.